So we are back with a brand new movie on What If Naruto Was Start New Long Trip with Ophis Before Marriage movie, but before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. It was dark and quiet. The stillness of the night was tormenting and thrilling at the same time. The flutter of the winds, the chirping of insects, and the luminous light of the moon were ideal compared to the destruction that had just happened below. Beneath the dark gloom and the luminous moon existed the village hidden in the leaves. One of the most powerful villages to ever prevail in the ruthless world of elemental nations. The village was a manifestation of both power and peace. Shinobis, ruthless and powerful individuals, were the dark side of the structure, while civilians, the ones who constituted the majority of producers and consumers of the economy, were the light that contrasted the dark. From the countless years since its creation, Konoha invariably remained at the top of the world. Numerous people believe it was because of the powerful shinobis it gave birth to over the course of time, while others charged it on the foolishness of the remaining villages. Whatever the reasons were, Konoha never failed to win. From the powerful duo of Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha to the fabled once-in-a-millennium genius, Minato Namikaze, Konoha always possessed someone to preserve it above everyone else. People like Madara Uchiha injected the fear of Konoha's military might into everyone's hearts, while others like Tobirama Senju awarded the whole shinobi world with numerous invaluable aspects and strategies. One could detest it or worship it, but they couldn't deny the fact that the village was the pinnacle of everything in the nations. Konoha was something every other village wanted to be, but could not emulate successfully. We couldn't find him anywhere, Hokage-sama. A voice resonated in the deep dark chamber, completely apathetic to the chaos which was transpiring in the village above. The lone eye of the speaker was emanating nothing but detachment to the ordeal. Something stirred in the shadows of the room. "I know Kakashi-kun, I know." Another voice responded, sounding as apathetic as the initial speaker. "There is nothing that we can do now." The voice wavered as a surge of sadness struck the speaker. "But you are the Hokage, Hiruzen-sama." The lone eye of Kakashi narrowed in hatred. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You can do anything." A moment of silence accompanied his outburst as his eye began to gleam between red and onyx. The old brown eyes glanced down, attempting to find an escape from the sharp words of the teenager. "I can't, Kakashi-kun," Hiruzen whispered, frowning ever so slightly at the dull expression of the boy. "I couldn't even save Naruto." A lone tear trickled down his weary cheek, staining the cold floor of the room. What was left unsaid was the fact that the child was most likely already dead, but Hiruzen still had a tiny portion of him yearning for his words to be proven false. Kakashi didn't say anything, his trembling shoulders were enough to convey his feelings. He was broken and his heart was enduring an unimaginable amount of pain at the moment. "Don't talk about him like that," his heart-shattering whisper nearly slashed through Hiruzen's stoic veil. "He is not dead. He must be alive." Kakashi shouted, looking slightly deranged with his lone Sharingan spinning wildly. "When we find him, we will treat him like a hero, just like his father and mother. We will give him the training and the family he deserves, and nothing less." He couldn't contain the anger inside him anymore and sneered at the old man. Kakashi felt truly disgusted at the fact that Hiruzen dared to think that his sensei's son was dead. There was no way that could happen. Hiruzen nodded his head, totally agreeing with the words. Naruto was just like his father, blonde hair and bright blue eyes. He was everything Kushina and Minato expected him to be. "You were absolutely right, Kakashi-kun." His words hardly managed to get a reaction out of the boy. Naruto's death will not be forgotten. He will always be remembered as the hero of Konoha. Kakashi's silence didn't last for long as his eyes finally turned over to the corner of the room. A dark and cold area where the shadow of a man was sitting silently, observing their conversation with his sharp eyes. "Jiraiya-sama," he grumbled, "you truly are a failure." As soon the cold words left his mouth, the Hokage clenched the old desk tightly with his bare hands. For someone else, it would have been a warning of brewing danger, but for him, it was an indication that his words were able to inflict the desired effect. The man sitting in the shadows was one of the most irresponsible and horrible people. Not only did this man forget to inform them earlier about a possible kidnapping, but he also made sure to only appear after everything had transpired. While the ninja of Kumo were torturing little Naruto, this man was enjoying the touches of women from brothels in a nearby city. "I'm not saying anything wrong, Hokage-sama," Kakashi continued, unfazed by the clenching of Hiruzen's hands. "This man is nothing but a walking failure, just like the other two students of yours." He knew his words would sting the old man, and his assumption turned out to be true when the said man flinched at the jab. "Aren't you speaking a lot, brat?" Jiraiya finally stood up from his position, his huge form towering the window of the room easily, and soon the only ray of moonlight was barred from entering the dark place. Now, the only source of the light was the solitary glowing Sharingan of Kakashi. Ever so slowly, the room was drowning in the ominous shade of red. "No." The eye of hatred blazed momentarily. Everything I just said was true and he was not able to complete his statement because a rough hand made contact with his face and sent him flying towards the entrance of the room. Do you even know how much Naruto meant to me? The old sage whispered, his dull eyes expressing no interest in the discussion whatsoever. For them, everything was dull and meaningless now. The undying fire that was keeping them alive until now was no more. Naruto was no more. He died, taking his will to live with him to the afterlife. There was no reason for him to live in this cursed world now. He was the only family I had. Liar, Naruto meant nothing to you. For you, his value was less than that of a harlot. Kakashi finally got hold of himself and stood up on his feet. His face was bruised because of the backhand he had received from an angry Jiraiya. He wouldn't lie, the whole part was stinging badly, but at the moment, he had these two old men who really needed a dose of reality. So swallowing the pain, he made a trek towards the old shinobis. Kakashi, enough. His feet wavered a little when the old man sent a blast of chakra towards him, but he managed to withstand it. Today, there was no one who could stop him from revealing the idiocy of these so-called experienced shinobi. You both are the worst. That managed to silence everyone, even the hidden Anbis who were present from the start. You call yourself a strong and wise leader, Hiruzen-sama, yet you failed to correct your biggest mistake, Orochimaru. It's only because of you and only you that countless innocent children had to lose their lives. That monster, whom you call your beloved student, performed every inhumane experiment one can think of on those poor children, and still you've yet to express your remorse for those consequences. Every time someone asks you about that monster, the explanation you give them is how depressed you are for your student. Even after all the inhumane things he had done and is probably still doing, you still feel sorry for him. The silence was suffocating. It was the first time Kakashi had shown so many emotions at once. He allowed every suppressed emotion inside him to erupt in the form of words, and the result was astonishing. Hiruzen Sarutobi was stunned. The professor was stunned. Still, Kakashi didn't feel any pride at the notion. For him, the man was nothing but a living example of hypocrisy. And you, Jiraiya-sama, he turned his eyes towards the man who immediately stiffened because of the recent occurrence. I only have one thing to say about you. He began. Pathetic pervert. With that, Kakashi strode out of the room, slamming the door loudly behind him. Darkness claimed the room. Uo. The interdimensional void was a place covered with nothing but arrays of vivid color and emptiness. It was a vast land situated amidst the boundaries of three major dimensions. Heaven, underworld, and the mortal world, also known as Earth. True to its name, it also served as a place that could be used to travel from one dimension to another. Though visited by countless guests daily, the place surprisingly had only two permanent residents. First being the Dragon of the Apocalypse, also known as Great Red, while the other being the Infinity Dragon, Ophis. Throughout the ages, both of the dragons had fought each other countless times for the ultimate dominion of the realm, and only settled down when the Great Red was finally able to overwhelm his foe, Ophis, through small but sufficient differences in raw power and magic. Defeated but not finished, Ophis never accepted her defeat and continued to exist in the deep dark corner of its former home, hoping to one day take what was hers from the very beginning. Centuries passed away but unfortunately, the Infinity Dragon was unable to achieve what she dreamed of. Every time she tried to fight a rival for her home, that powerful dragon somehow managed to defeat her again and again. After a few more unfruitful attempts, Ophis finally decided to stop the continuous cycle of battles and destruction. She might be clueless, but even she understood that there was no way she could defeat a being as powerful as her opponent, the Great Red. He was just too powerful for her. So, after thinking about her dilemma for a while, she understood that the source of her problems lied within herself. She was uninformed and uncommunicative. While the Great Red had a mouth that could put anyone to shame, she, on the other hand, possessed little to no communicative skills. One might think why she was worried about such a trivial aspect, but Ophis was certain that her inability to provoke that red giant during their battles was one of the main reasons why she always ended up being on the losing side of the conflict. She also thought that her own inability to feel anything played a major part in her frequent losses. As she thought of who she could learn from, she drew up a blank. Sure, there were gods out there who knew how to orate very well and could probably teach her how to feel emotions, but she knew that her presence would either make them mute, make them piss their pants, or a combination of both. The few people that wouldn't do that could be counted on one hand. They were Yahweh, Hades, and Izanami. Hades and Izanami were out of the question, both of them would likely try to use her for their own means. And while she could obliterate them with a snap of her finger, she really couldn't be bothered to make such an effort. That left only Yahweh, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that he wouldn't be much better than the previous two. She could see through the grandfatherly mask he put on and honestly thought that he was far worse. Under the kind facade was a cold and ruthless god who wanted his own religion to be the only one in the human world. Last she heard, Yahweh made something called the Ten Commandments and wanted his followers to kill whomever didn't follow his religion. She thought it was ironic that one of the commandments was thou shalt not kill, yet he encourages the killing of non-believers of Christianity. She started to realize that perhaps she could not find what she wanted in this world. Everyone who had the ability to help her likely would not. While she could force them to, she knew that it would never be a long-term solution. She needed someone who would help her willingly and would be by her side whenever she needed them. For the first time in many millennia, unbeknownst even to herself, the little infinity dragon felt lonely. Looking towards that red annoyance, who was doing aerial acrobatics, she decided enough was enough. With an expression of distaste on her face, she tore reality open and jumped into that tier, hoping that whatever world she landed in, she would be able to find someone whom she could learn from. As the rift closed, said red annoyance immediately stopped doing barrel rolls in midair and started hovering there, with his face arranged in an unreadable expression. It seems that I have failed. Great Red rumbled into the nothingness, his gaze sweeping the kaleidoscope of colors that adorned the space of the dimensional gap. I had hoped that with myself being so noisy and rowdy, you would feel something other than apathy. But I must have taken the wrong path in that regard. Heaving out a sigh, Great Red started drifting around slowly and solemnly. Wherever you end up, I can only pray for your success. I hope that you'll be able to find your emotions at last. Looking back once more towards the place where Ophis disappeared, Great Red let out one last sentence before entering a portal that he created. Good luck, Ophis. Land of Hot Waters. The Land of Hot Waters was a country that attracted both tourists and shinobis alike. Situated between the two major countries of lightning and fire, it was a place filled with beautiful rivers, dense and lush green forests, and soul-warming hot springs. Its beautiful features, resource-rich geology, and ideal location not only made it the perfect tourist destination, but also helped the village to become the ideal nexus for the trade routes between its neighboring giants. For years, it continued to remain as the trade giant and served as one of the most important allies of the Fire Country. Everything was going perfectly for the country and its people until its other neighbor, Lightning Country, invaded its beautiful towns. What used to be a flourishing and economically stable haven soon became a barren and desolate wasteland filled with the remains of the glorious past. Hot springs and forests, which used to attract countless tourists and keep the economy going, became ravaged by the invasion, and the people who were dependent on them for their livelihoods were left with no choice but to travel to foreign lands. The ghosts of the past and ninjas of Kumogakure continued to haunt and abuse the remaining populace of the country until a miracle happened, a miracle that led to the death of the crazy Reikage. With him gone, Kumogakure was left with no choice but to withdraw their numerous forces from the country. But the ninjas gone, Mother Nature began to heal itself and soon the country found itself walking on the path of glory once more. Knowing that they needed their main attractions back, the people of the region started restoring the remains of their lost hot springs, forests, and other major tourist attractions. In a small attempt to boost the morale and aforementioned actions of his poor citizens, the daimon of the Land of Hot Waters made an agreement with the daimons of the neighboring country and declared his land as a valuable tourist attraction, one which was open to everyone and was needed to be protected at all costs. It wasn't long before everything returned to how it used to be in the past. Some people took possession of the businesses, while others decided to keep building more fabulous pieces of art. The continuous improvement of the infrastructure and development in the field of tourism soon led to the country becoming the most important and safest tourist destination in the whole world. The country continued to mark its presence upon the history of the world and reaffirmed its position as the top tourist destination. The residents, who in the past barely had the money for a single meal, were now among the wealthiest people in any minor country. Sure, they couldn't compete with the merchants of the 5 major countries, but for them, what they had was enough. Among those residents, there was an old couple, the Kawajishi family of Yugakure, a hidden village located in the beautiful Land of Hot Waters. The household was a very well-known family in the town as they were the ones who constructed the very first hot spring on this side of the country, using their own hard-earned cash. They were also among the very few who steadfastly refused to leave the country when Kumo invaded and were lucky enough to keep the majority of their possessions. Their residence was situated beside the beautiful banks of River Bibu, where they owned an inn that had the 3rd largest hot springs of the land. Despite being somewhat removed from the main village, their inn was actually one of the most famous ones, with many people, including foreign shinobi, stopping by each day. It was at this inn, Ophis found herself wandering into one night. Bibu River. Peculiar, Ophis said to herself as she walked along the banks of River Bibu. She had arrived in this world around a month previously and traveled far and wide. She saw the harsh deserts of Suna, the rocky mountains of Iwa, and the floating islands of Kumo, just to name a few places. She even entered the villages, completely oblivious to the scandalized and pitiful gazes of the inhabitants upon seeing her walking around in her attire. She would have stayed longer and tried to learn more, if not for the fact that she could sense the pure fear from the shinobis, who were jumping around like headless chickens, trying to find whatever they were trying to find. She was confused by the reaction she caused to the shinobis. Did she do something wrong? She made sure to mask her entire power, so there was no way anyone could sense her. They should have just thought she was a random child and ignored her. What she didn't know, however, was the fact that the way she dressed was only seen among prostitutes in the red light districts of the villages. Combined with the fact that she looked like a young child, led everyone to the sickening, but wrong, conclusions. That was only what the civilian side of the population saw. The shinobi side could immediately feel the power she exuded, but they were unable to pinpoint the source of it because it seemingly came from everywhere and nowhere at once. While it was true that Ophis masking her power would have usually worked, she didn't take into account that she was in a different world and things might not be the same. Indeed, her attempt to mask her power only hid what seemed like a sliver of her power and basically flooded the entire village instantly. Her very presence alone, even if she didn't do anything except walk around aimlessly, caused every village she entered to immediately go onto the highest alert and track everyone's movement. The respective cages of the villages didn't know where the source of the power was, so they could only send whatever shinobis they had to carry out recon. They did not know how such a being of power could just randomly appear in the middle of the village, with no logs of them entering at all. As such, they were scared out of their wits and could only pray that whatever had entered their village didn't mean any harm. She soon realized that she wouldn't get anything from walking around so openly. Everyone she asked either looked at her weirdly and hurried away or just ignored her. She quickly decided that stealth was the best option and started quietly observing from a distance. She didn't care about the chaos she caused to the shinobis by suddenly disappearing in broad daylight and her power suddenly vanishing. As she watched the people from afar, she learned quite a few things about the humans of this world. Back in her own world, none of the humans had the ability to use chakra, only the yokai could, assuming that this world's chakra was the same as her own. She noticed with interest that some of these shinobi might actually be able to go toe-to-toe with a mid-level yokai, with a select few able to take on the higher level ones. Focusing on a few of the stronger individuals, she closely watched them, taking notice of everything they did, from eating to traveling to talking. She wanted to understand what drove them and how they went about their day-to-day business. By doing so, she hoped to sort out her own emotions and figure out how they worked. However, this didn't work as well as she hoped because they would instantly go on guard whenever she tried to get close. Even the weaker ones would start acting uneasy and nervous, despite not being able to see her. Left with no choice, she randomly teleported to a location, which just so happened to be the Bibu River, which is where she is currently walking. I must have done something, she thought as she trudged along the bank, uncaring about the mud that splattered her dress. They act so nervously around me, they shouldn't know who I am, yet they are still scared. As she thought out these lines, she felt a small, sinking feeling somewhere in her chest. She had absolutely no clue what it was and had nobody to ask, since nobody would talk to her normally. Maybe this world isn't the right one. Maybe I should find a different one where they talk to me normally. As she raised her hand, preparing to open another tier in reality, an elderly voice called out to her, making her stop. Hello there. Who might you be, young lady? A strong, but slightly wizened voice spoke up from ahead of her. Looking in the direction of the voice, she saw an elderly man waving at her, holding a fishing rod in one hand, sitting on a crate of what she assumed was fishing tools. The man looked to be around in his 60s, he was wearing a hat with fishing hooks along the brim, a striped shirt with orange and black patterns, and a set of ordinary khaki shorts. He had black hair with streaks of gray indicative of his old age along with a goatee and rather thick eyebrows. His face and his body were fairly well toned for someone of his age, but showed signs of going to seed. Despite all of that, his muscles were still relatively well defined. Overall, he looked like an elderly veteran that has been in wars. Walking towards him, Ophis plopped herself down on a rock beside him and started speaking to him in her monotone voice. I am Ophis. She watched the man's face closely for any sign of recognition, as this was the first time she had actually told anyone her name. She had no chance in the past, and she wanted to know if her name meant anything in this world. Well then, Miss Ophis, what are you doing out here by yourself? The man was deeply concerned with what he saw. He had noticed her deep in thought and had gotten a good look at her face and her clothes. He saw the almost dead fish eyes, saw what she was wearing, and got a general idea of how old she was. He arrived at the same conclusion as everyone else, but unlike the others, he was determined to know more about her. If he was right about her origins, then he would never forgive himself if he didn't at least attempt to help her through the trauma she must have suffered. I have no reason. I am wandering aimlessly. The sheer bluntness of what she said disturbed him greatly, and he was starting to think that his theory was correct. Having made up his mind, he slowly got up and picked up the box he was sitting on, making no sudden movements in case he scared her away. Ophis stared at him confusedly. Why was he acting so strangely? Did he also not want anything to do with her? She felt the same sinking feeling earlier, returning with a vengeance. It's almost night time. Do you have anywhere to go, Ophis? Upon seeing her shake her head in denial, he continued speaking. Then would you like to come with me? My wife and I own a small inn, and we have space for you. As Ophis stared at him unblinkingly, he started feeling very nervous. With a sudden jolt, he realized what was wrong. He was an old man in the middle of nowhere, inviting a scantily clad child to the place where he lived. Yeah, he understood why she'd be staring at him so intently, and he almost kicked himself for not noticing it earlier. It's completely alright if you don't, he hastily said, dropping the items he was carrying and waving his hands around frantically. I'm just worried that because you're so young, you might not have anyone to take care of you. I just wanted to give you a place to live and rest, nothing more. This made Ophis even more confused. Why was he suddenly explaining himself to him? What did he think she was? She decided that it might be a good idea to follow this man, as he seemed sincere about offering a place to stay. Quite frankly, she was getting tired of sleeping in trees and on the ground. An inn sounded nice, and being taken care of was something she had never experienced before. Okay, I will follow you. The man's ramblings were broken off as soon as he heard what Ophis said, letting a smile form on his slightly wrinkled face. He picked up his items and motioned for her to follow. He didn't attempt to make any physical contact with her because by now, he was almost certain of his theory that she had escaped from her unwilling servitude in a brothel. He felt a fit of simmering anger the likes of which he had not felt for years rising within him. If he ever found what depraved establishment would use children to fulfill their sick desires, he would make a bonfire and personally burn every single person involved in it. Alive and screaming. He was shaken out from his dark thoughts when he felt a small hand poking at the back of his head. With a start, he realized that somehow, Ophis had managed to get on his back and was piggybacking him. He was glad that she had put so much trust in him, and without further ado, he hoisted up his fishing rod and box and started walking back towards the inn. Ooh. A few days had passed since Ophis had followed the old man, who she came to understand was called Ito Kawajishi, back to his inn. She recalled the first time she had experienced sleeping in a soft bed at night and found that she wanted more of it. His wife, Suga Kawajishi, was also someone that Ophis would remember. She was the one who gave Ophis her first warm bath in the hot spring, and she discovered that it was a very pleasant experience. Well, pleasant if one didn't ingest the soap. To this day, she still doesn't understand why Ito and Suga would laugh whenever she asked why soap tasted so nasty. She was given a new set of clothes to wear. They consisted of an orange and blue flower yukata with a set of simple undergarments. They felt a bit weird on her body, and when she asked why she had to wear them, the two looked uneasily at each other, but still answered. These past few days were far more productive than the entirety of the past month. Her short stay had allowed her to learn so much more about the world around her and, more importantly, about herself. She could now identify the sinking feeling she felt earlier as sadness, and she disliked that feeling. She never wanted to feel it again. The fact that the majority of the people who arrived at the inn were speaking to her warmly and normally also made her feel very grateful. She could, at last, ask people directly about lots of different things and receive actual answers. However, she wasn't able to learn much about the shinobi lifestyle because it seemed that the only patrons there were only civilians. When she asked Ito and Suga about why there weren't any shinobis around, they too didn't know. Even though the village had been turned from a hidden shinobi village to a major tourist attraction, there still used to be plenty of shinobi who arrived here, but recently, there have been none. They didn't mind too much though, since the business was fine without their patronage. And to be completely honest, they didn't care much for shinobis anyway. Given their past experience with Kumo shinobis raising their village, a village that had long given up on shinobi business, nobody could blame them. They would treat them just like any other guest, but they wouldn't show any special preference towards them. Ophis slowly started to find that she actually enjoyed this place. She enjoyed being around the couple who took her in, she enjoyed talking with the other villagers, and above all else, she enjoyed the hot springs and a warm bed. As a matter of fact, she found herself starting to not care about the silence she craved so much anymore. The more she thought about it, the more she found herself not wanting to return. Is this what I have wanted? She thought to herself as she sat in her room, staring at a flickering candle. Is this what I have been craving all this time? She formed a small snake and watched it slither around the candle, ignoring the heat from the flame. I like this world. It feels nice. I have never felt nice in the other world before. She didn't even realize it, but she has started to refer to her old world as the other world. She was truly starting to gain emotions. I don't want to leave. I want to stay here. I want to know more and understand myself. Little did she know, her wish would be granted very soon, in the form of 3 Kumo shinobi carrying a wriggling sack. It was raining in Yugakure. Sounds of thunder and drizzle were echoing in the beautiful valley surrounded by mountains and 2 major rivers. If one were to look outside, all they would see was a thick blanket of smog and rain. Streets that were usually filled with people and animals were now a barren landscape, abiding to be painted by the drops of water falling from heaven. Far away from those barren streets, the Infinity Dragon was reveling in what could be termed as the most satisfying activity that she had ever performed in her long life. Fishing. An activity that had become her favorite ever since Old Man Ito had first introduced it to her. At first, she tried it due to mild curiosity, but soon, when she started to catch the rarest fishes without any outside help, her mind began to love the activity. The amusement she felt whenever she saw Ito always crying what he called manly tears whenever he saw Ophis carry back her haul was a bonus. Also, the fact that she would be showered with praises and head pats for catching them only fueled her love for it. Not only was she catching delicious food, but she was also getting to learn the emotion that was happiness. Happiness. And idle Ophis, who was sitting on the banks of her favorite river, whispered out to no one in particular. It's a very strange emotion, she noted with a very rare smile on her face, a smile that would have made anyone melt at the mere sight of it. It was warm and genuine, something she had only learned to concoct after spending weeks with the old couple of the Kawajishi family. Over the past few months, she had made considerable progress in her quest to gain emotions. It was difficult at first, with her not knowing social customs and all, but with the constant support of Ito and Suga, she had finally started the process of leaving her shell. No longer did she speak short sentences with the people she considered to be close to. When around strangers she would speak like before, but with Ito and Suga, she'd start talking longer sentences and in a manner that could only be described as animatedly. This notion had the old couple shedding tears of joy inwardly because she was behaving exactly like what they thought a child would. The old couple had lost the ability to produce a child because Tsuga suffered a grievous injury when she was younger, permanently damaging her womb. It filled them with immeasurable joy as a dream that they had long since thought to be impossible was coming true in front of their very eyes. Having a child of their own and watching them grow up. They watched as she started to grow mentally and socially, helped without hesitation whenever she seemingly struggled with something, but most importantly, they smiled whenever they saw their precious daughter smile. It wasn't just the couple who had been changed by her arrival, Ophis herself had also changed immensely. She had started interacting with the other villagers more often, and she realized that there was so much more to humans and their emotions than she had previously thought. She had seen what some of the other humans in the ninja villages could do, ranging all the way from murder to rape, even torture, and she thought that it was the norm in those places. However, after being around the people in her village and mingling for a while, she realized that it was not the case. It was only when she asked around did she realize that the places where she had seen were usually off limits to the general public, as they were often called prisons or torture and interrogation. She was met with some concerned stares when she asked about those places and even more concerned ones when she told them to ask Ito as to why she wanted to know about those or how she knew. She couldn't figure out why they would be so nice to her the next time they saw her, but she appreciated it regardless. The villagers here were so friendly, much like Ito and Suga were to her. She felt like she was part of a large family. Family, her black eyes blinked at the mention of the familiar word. In the past, that word would have been ignored by her mind, but now that she knew what meaning that word held, she couldn't help but get drawn to the concept of having a family of her own. A family, she whispered with an unreadable expression on her small face. Do I need a family? Of course, she did. After spending so much time with people like Ito and Tsuga, one was bound to yearn for a family of their own. The old couple's love was contagious after all. Throughout her whole stay at their inn, old man Ito and his still beautiful wife, Suga, had made sure to spoil her as much as they could. From buying her the most expensive kimono in the town to feeding her the most delicious food, the Kawajishi couple had made sure to treat her as their own daughter, and Ophis wouldn't lie, she liked it even more than the silence of her void. For the first time in eternity, she found herself at peace. At this place, Ophis truly felt at home. But, I still have to get rid of Bakared. He might find me here. I have to. She paused and blinked when a huge fish jumped out of the river and drizzled her with countless drops of fresh water. Catch it. It's huge. As if the fish could understand her, the huge marine animal disappeared into the depths of the water, and just like that, Ophis forgot about the great red and began to focus on her next prey. I'll fry you. There was something akin to a small fire in her eyes as the words left her mouth. Ooh. Is he still unconscious? Yes. Good. But boss, what about those Konohanins? SHHHH, stupid. Don't speak about our mission in this village. Sorry boss. It's just that I'm nervous about this. This is hardly the first time we are going on an espionage or kidnapping mission. You might not know this, but we are the best team around. What has got you so nervous now? Yes, but this is the first time we have done so in a major village, Kohona no less. They might be tree-hugging scum, but we can't deny their strength. We have lost ever. His ramblings were cut off by the leader grabbing him by the collar and bringing his face closer than comfortable to his subordinates, staring right in his eyes. Listen here, you little shit. We were given a job. A job we agreed to after knowing the risks. A job that is near completion. I do not care what is bothering you, get it sorted out before we set out tonight. We have the package, we are not messing this up now, you better get this in your head. I will not tolerate failure. Is that understood? The menacing whisper shout of the leader of the team of four rooted the shinobi in his place before he managed to gather enough of his bearings to give a slight nod to his leader, prompting him to let go of his subordinate, making the man collapse to the ground as a boneless heap. Does anyone else have any issues that need addressing? Getting no response, he nodded slightly, that's what I thought. If anyone messes this up, I'll kill them in the most painful way I can think up before Kohona gets that chance. Your performance today will be an indication of how much you value your own life. Be prepared. But that Atama, the leader of the team, headed out of the room they had rented. Kohona, despite being a supposedly hidden village, was more like a landmark, known to almost everyone in the elemental nations. Even entering the village under the guise of customers looking to hire ninjas was easier than they thought. A few forged papers, a false job description of hiring chunins on behalf of the daimyo of Grass Country, and they were in. Even more surprising was the total lack of security around their mark, but they weren't ones to look a gift horse in the mouth. Stupid. He thought bitterly as he walked towards the general store in an unhappy mood, annoyed at the incompetence of his new and temporary, he reminded himself, teammate. He was the best tracker and infiltrator that Kumo had, and his team was the most successful in Kumo's history. However, one of their members recently got injured quite badly in an accident, so they had to have a replacement assigned to them. Usually, they could work with that, but the issue was that the replacement was a newbie, and a prideful one to boot. The chain was only as strong as its weakest link, and in terms of their team, the weakest link dragged them from being the strongest covert team into probably the weakest. So engrossed he was with his thoughts that he didn't notice the narrowed black eyes that were following him as he walked past. Uo. Kumo Ophis thought as she saw the ninja walk past her without noticing her presence at all. What are they doing here? She had learned of what happened to the village she was living in from Ito and Suga. To say that she was angry was an understatement. For the first time in her endless existence, she felt a true burning rage simmer deep within her. This was not the same feeling she felt when she saw Great Red, it was far darker and significantly more intense. She felt the need to go to Kumo and unleash her power to evaporate the village and everyone associated with it. The only reason she didn't do so was because Ito and Suga seemingly didn't want it. She had offered to go and obliterate Kumo, but they just laughed and thanked her for her offer, declining it with an amused chuckle. She felt the confusion return, but she didn't question them. She figured that they had their reasons for not wanting to do so, so she stayed put. She trusted them. What Ito and Suga didn't know was that Ophis wasn't joking. If they had answered affirmatively, there would be one less hidden village in the elemental nations. As the man disappeared into the store, Ophis mentally sent a thank you to the helpful librarian who assisted her in finding books about the world, in particular, ones about chakra and spiritual energy. She came across those terms back when she was in the hidden villages, and she always wanted to know what those two terms meant. After reading the scrolls and books about them, she started to get an understanding as to why the shinobis felt so nervous whenever she was around and the civilians were not. Chakra and spiritual energy were everywhere in this world, it was fundamentally the oxygen of the place, and nothing could survive without it. It was to the extent that even an untrained civilian could sense it if there was a sufficient amount. She concluded that it was because her power was so different that none of the civilians could sense her, and shinobis could only get a general feeling of her power. It was like a normal human standing on the earth, the human wouldn't feel the earth moving around the sun, nor would they feel the earth spinning. In this instance, her power would be the earth, and the civilians would be the normal humans. The difference was just too large for them to notice. The shinobi on the other hand would be a step above the normal human. They would feel that something was around, but they cannot pinpoint where. Using the earth and human analogy again, they would feel the earth spinning, but they would be unable to pinpoint where the spinning is. She realized that because her power was not present in this world, there was nothing more she could do to gain more knowledge. As a result, she converted the entirety of her immeasurable power into the same spiritual energy as mentioned in the book, and the results were seemingly perfect. Using the same method she used to suppress her original power, she cautiously teleported into random shinobi villages and walked around as a test. She felt a sense of accomplishment when she noticed that none of the villages became alert or reacted to her presence like before. After a while, she arrived at the inn just as the clock hit 9 a.m. Morning, Odo-san the dragon girl greeted her caretaker with a casual wave of her hand and a small smile as she opened the door and sat down. Ito, who was completely silent a while ago, began to chuckle at Ophis, no doubt amused by her way of greeting him. "It's Ito-san, little Ophis. Autumn-san is used to greet your father." He corrected her, but the girl just waved his explanation away. "What is a father?" Ophis asked as she sat down on the bench adjacent to the place where those Kumo shinobi were sitting. Huh? Ito blinked at the odd question. Hadn't he already told her about that? He thought but ultimately decided to entertain her innocent query. A father is someone who's very important to a child, Ophis. He is the person who does everything in his capability to fulfill his child's wishes and dreams. His explanation was erratic and unappealing, but the old man knew his curious little girl would understand him without any trouble. Just like he thought, Ophis smiled at him, a thing she had begun to do a lot ever since she had moved in with him. Maybe it was the effect of the environment or maybe it was the warm personality of his wife, but whatever had led to Ophis being like that was a blessing in disguise for them. "Then you are my father, Autumn-san." Her statement made Ito smile again. "No. Yes, you are." "No." Ophis' smile got bigger and brighter. "Yes, you are." "No." "Hey, old freak. Can you serve us our breakfast already?" Black eyes took a sharp turn to their right and got locked onto the frame of a man who wasn't going to see the beautiful evening of Yugakure today. He was walking down the stairs and was carrying a sack over his shoulder. Behave it was a mere whisper, but Ophis was sure that the man heard her, after all, one doesn't make that silly face when they are perfectly calm. Brown met black as the man locked his eyes with her own. "Who are you, little girl?" he asked, a cruel smile dancing on his dry lips. Before Ophis could riposte, Ito intervened in the argument. "Ophis. Don't argue with the guests." He tried to control the small girl, but she, like an unexpected and fearless female she was, ignored his words and began to glare at the angry Kumo shinobi, a gesture that only angered the ninja further. "Oh dear," the old inn owner thought to himself as he saw that cold look on Ophis' face. She was about to say something stupid. "Ophis, my name is Ophis. And you're noisy." The Kumo shinobi barely restrained himself from hurting the girl on the spot. The humiliation from his senior earlier today was still fresh in his mind and was hurting his pride like nothing else. At that time he was able to control himself from killing someone, but now after seeing this small dimwit trying to lecture him for nothing, his patience was finally on the verge of leaving his body. "Ophis. What an odd name." Ophis blinked at the outright jab at her name. "Oh really?" she hummed, a thoughtful expression resting on her small face. Anger was practically oozing out of the shinobi's skin now. "Do you want to die, girl?" His question earned him another blank stare from the girl. "What type of question is that, noisy man?" With a cold look on her face, Ophis finally took a step forward. "Op. SSHH old freak. Let her do whatever she is doing." In the past, Ito would have been silenced by that man, but now, he was no longer afraid of these shinobi, because now, he had this little girl, who was probably the most clueless person in the world, to protect. "Ophis, enough. Go back to your room." Ophis stopped her walk and looked at her father. "He disrespected Odo-san," was her reply as if the words were enough explanation for her actions. Which according to her, were. "So what if I did? Is this old man supposed to be some daimyo? Learn your place, kid, unless you wanna die." "Shut up. You are annoying." With those words Ophis prepared to obliterate the annoying person, only to be stopped by Ito's voice. "Just because I have not said anything about your behavior till now, doesn't mean we welcome it, ninja-san. You can show yourself out, we are not willing to serve you." The words were enough to make the ninja lose it. First his senior, then that little girl, now this old man. He needed something to take all his anger out on, and he needed it fast. With that thought in mind, he placed a none too gentle hand on Ito's shoulder, causing him to turn around, only for a fist to meet his cheek, knocking him out. While the shinobi had held back, simply because he wasn't in the mood to kill anyone, didn't mean the blow was any less painful to the old man. With a slight cry, Ito collapsed to the floor unconscious, leaving behind an utterly horrified and hurt Ophis. "Who isn't going to serve me now, huh?" An animalistic shout left the mouth of the angry shinobi, a shout that conveyed both his frustration and satisfaction very well. "Tell me." He yelled again and kicked the unconscious man in the abdomen, drawing a painful groan from him in the process. "And you," he turned his head to his right in order to look at the girl. "She deserved some punishment too." How dare whatever he was going to say perished in his mouth as soon as his eyes got locked with onyx orbs of the girl. They were wrong. They were just so very 8W6R604N7G4. D6. %HH3YMY, PH79.JKQE4TA ey 4%RKBLK4JR Euros 8, 91TY0SU, QE7BR4U. Number S number AXXE acute 891ZWPPL 7 volts. Number AFS50U.N, I number PF ACO acute 4. New York TT16E and MZ Ti $UV7SH.SUM $30 F equals Z, 6M 2% 2M0 U9 R5 Minnesota 1AA, Y7ZMG plus New Hampshire. IV high AW7Z $TGUZ %$ RJKX R6, 11 NB04G3IIY0 ZZ2 FAQN7. U number MS1 FEG4 plus UZ 1% 2HC plus BXE. The man could feel his mind shattering as he gazed into the abyss. He vaguely felt himself collapsing onto the ground as foam started forming from his mouth. He could feel his sanity draining away, as well as his very being melting and leaving this reality, as the abyss gazed back at him, judging him, condemning him. He no longer saw anything except a vision of a giant black dragon, imprinted on a twisting void of what could only be described as pure chaos. It was staring into his soul, reading his past, present, and future. As seconds ticked by, he started to realize that something was not right with the dragon. It didn't make sense, dragons were not supposed to look like that. This was a monstrosity that shouldn't exist. Such a thing shouldn't exist. It shouldn't exist. I7BT80. QA5HYNGAS5IQH72BO acute 8U8K, E972 and plus D8Y plus LN53B6. T6 Montana R4 and XE6K X8THME circumflex 41 R4. HT70 equals W. Whispers of madness filled his ears as he tried to turn his head away from the ghastly image of wrongness, but he couldn't. He tried averting his eyes, but that only increased the volume of the whispers. He couldn't take it anymore, he couldn't. Wait. Head. Eyes. Ears. What were those and why did they sound so familiar? Why did he know about them? Why did he need to know about them? They held no significance to him, right? You dare hurt Autumn-san. A dual-layered voice oozing with insanity echoed out from seemingly everywhere in the ever-changing void, breaking him from his psychotic thoughts. The voice finally disintegrated what tiny sliver of his mind remained. He was now no longer a human, he was now it. It came to a horrific realization. It began to realize that it was nothing. It realized that everything held no meaning. Everything was just nothing. 69 GUE5UHAV7ME8 plus T equals W equals Y6KY7s T8M and H7 plus I5s. JN6UYG79A equals J42. Plus WFW81. A846 J69AXU8 Northwest, XX S50.TJX89IT equals X72GN73B05, FT4N4HC equals I8VSNJT5339G8U plus SB. As soon as it came to that conclusion, it forgot how to breathe. Its heart forgot how to beat. Its brain forgot how to function. It soon ceased to exist in the world and faded into the void of horror. Ooh. Ophis wrinkled her nose in disgust as she gazed down at the dead form of the Kumo shinobi. It was quite a rather disturbing sight. Lumpy, gray matter leaked from its ears, and a clear, but grayish liquid flowed from the empty sockets of what was once a living being. That wasn't even counting the brown and yellow stains on the dead shinobi's pants and the rug. Bleh. Smells horrid, she thought, and snapped her fingers, vanishing the corpse and leaving no trace of the smell of urine and excrement he left behind. It was so thorough that nobody could tell that there used to be a person there. Usually, she would have just killed these types of people if they would have met her earlier, but now, after living with Suga and Ito for so long, Ophis had begun to quell her anger to a level where she no longer wanted to hurt anyone badly. Instead, she had learned to solve disputes with the power of her words. Unless someone hurts Suga and Ito. She whispered to herself with a slightly maniacal smile. She had gotten a feeling which she especially enjoyed, one which could only come from spending time with people who cared about you. Instant death was far too easy for people like these. She would break anyone who dared to harm what she saw as hers without any mercy. Satisfied with her work, she was about to wake up her old man, but was yet again interrupted by some lowly humans. Hey. Where is our teammate? The first Kumo shinobi said as he ran into the room. What are you talking about? Another asked confusedly as he followed the first. It was always just us three here. The Raikage didn't have enough time to get a suitable replacement for us. Are you sure you got enough sleep? Thinking for a while, the first shinobi shrugged and responded, probably not. Must have thought that we had another teammate due to not getting enough sleep. This place is really trash. He ignored the irony of calling the inn trash when in fact, each room was on the level of a 4-star hotel room, including the one they rented. Enough bickering, the leader said, silencing the two people behind him. We are here to determine who was releasing such an amount of potent chakra and if they will pose a threat to our mission. Ophis sighed as the annoying people moved around, preventing her from going to Ito. She was about to shove them away with her power when she heard one of the ninjas whispering something interesting to his leader. "Boss, should I take away the boy from here?" "Yes. Take the boy away from here and wait for us at the rear end of the town." Intrigued, Onyx eyes of the dragon followed the man as he strolled towards the motionless sack that was resting on the table of her restaurant. But before she could get a decent look at the sack, her attention was disrupted by a very loud shout. "Boy, you. Little girl. Have you seen anyone suspicious around here?" Ophis frowned as she heard the little girl remark again for the 100th time. She was beginning to get tired of it in her petite body. "Yes." The man wasted no time and flickered before her. "What?" he asked with a little urgency to his voice. "You and your team. What are you doing here? What is in that bag?" Questions after questions left Ophis's mouth as she glared at the man who was clearly taken aback by the sudden change of her attitude. What do you mean, little girl? There is nothing wrong with us. We are shinobi of Kumagakure and we are on a small mission." Acting as cool as he could, the leader of the team tried to divert the attention from the current topic of discussion. If he was right, then Yugakure was still in a decent relationship with Konoha, and if the word got out that they did something stupid here, then Konoha wouldn't waste any time in taking strict action, and that was the last thing he wanted to happen. The child dragon immediately noticed what the man was trying to do. If she was not sure before, then she was completely sure now. There's something wrong with that bag. For the past 2 days, these noisy shinobis had been carrying that sack with themselves, even to the lunch tables. "Liar," she whispered and scowled when the man began to glare daggers at her. "I'm liar." The man was practically fuming now and like a raging volcano that's about to erupt, he grabbed the girl by her throat and lifted her so that he could see the fear on her face clearly. But imagine his surprise when instead of inconceivable fear, he was greeted with a look so cold that it could have frozen the whole world if it wanted to. "For a small civilian, you do have a lot of courage, girl. Say, do you want to join me in my village?" he asked her as he gently brought her face close to his own. She had pleasingly smooth skin, he noted, but then again, almost every civilian woman was gifted with that boon. Apprehended in the noisy man's hold, Ophis still did not attempt to get out of that situation. Instead, she decided to ask him a question, a thing that she was sure would make him more furious. "Say, do you want to join the remains of your friend in my dimensional void?" Ophis's voice was as bland as ever, although if one were to listen closely, they would be able to discern the underlying tone of anger in her voice. This was picked up by the 3 shinobi whose danger senses skyrocketed. Dropping Ophis, the person who was holding Ophis up immediately got into formation with his 2 other teammates and stared at the girl warily and fearfully. None of them noticed that they were shaking with terror. What do you mean?" one of them said, not even realizing he stuttered at the start. He was feeling extremely scared, but he didn't know why. Something was screaming at him to get the hell out of there, but for some reason, his body refused to move. "What do you mean our friend? We didn't have anyone else here with us." Ophis let out a dark but satisfied smirk as she heard what the shinobi were saying. It seems like the new ability that she created did indeed work as she had hoped it would. It not only annihilated the victim, but it also modified the memories of the people in the immediate vicinity, with them being none the wiser. She started chuckling slowly as she realized that she had 3 test subjects on which to experiment with different variations of her new technique. Well, Y 7% plus B $5 IAN 5.92 equals 5.KT 7.8 plus number 1 equals 8, Z number 6. 7 equals A4 U81 W5 SU, 4H Q $7. O4 and QU4Z equals 5 IV plus KQ. Ophis's voice degraded into an echoing growl dripping with corruption and insanity once more as she unleashed her power onto the 3 shinobi, who instantly froze up as their pupils vanished, leaving only the whites of their eyes behind. She watched with disinterest as one screamed so hard that he ripped his throat apart and choked to death on his blood. Another one started whispering nonsensical things as he drew out his kunai, gouged his own eyes out with them, and slit his wrists, all while maintaining a smiling face that was the very definition of deranged. The final one was already dead, his head cracked open in a gruesome imitation of an egg, an effect of repeatedly smashing his head against the floor. Sighing at the mess they made on the rug, she twitched her finger at the mess and everything vanished, leaving it as clean as ever. Humph. They can't even die right. At least have the decency to not make a mess on Odo-san's rug. Ophis harumphed as she woke Ito up and proceeded to untie the sack. She stared and tilted her head inquisitively at the little boy clutching a battered but clean dog plushie. "Ooh-oh." Innocent and scared blue eyes collided with onyx orbs filled with curiosity as the small boy wriggled out of his tight confinement. Inch by inch, he slithered out of the bag like an experienced serpent and made himself comfortable on the huge seat in front, all while not attempting to confront whom he presumed were his saviors. And why should he? They'll just ignore him like other people. Right now, his safety was his biggest concern. He needed to get away from here, far away from here, somewhere where there would be no one to see around anywhere. His heart skipped a beat when he heard someone speak in front of him, and by the tone of it, the special someone was trying to talk to him. Slowly, he raised his head to look at his saviors, only to get lost in the curious black eyes of the girl again. There was something odd about them. It was as if the girl was trying to do something to him through them. Naruto, he squeaked and frowned when he saw confusion engulf the faces of his saviors. My name is Naruto. His attempts bore fruitful results as in a matter of seconds, the confusion vanished from their face and got replaced by something he had never seen on a stranger's face before. Happiness and relief. It was odd, he wouldn't lie. To have someone look at him like that felt strange. He didn't deserve those emotions. Those emotions should be reserved for someone very close and worthy, and Uzumaki Naruto was neither close to these people, nor was he worthy of anything. He was nothing but a stupid child who got tricked by the people of another village. How? Simple, they promised to give him something that he used to think of as impossible to achieve. They promised to take him away from the hell that was his village to a place that he could call home. A place where no one, and by no one, he really meant no one, would ignore him and his presence. They promised him a place where people would like and love him. It was preposterous, he knew, but his little heart refused to turn down that proposal. He wanted to be loved and cherished. He wanted to be acknowledged by the people, and so he accepted their offer without giving it a second thought. For the first few days, everything went smoothly. He felt like he was living a dream. Everywhere they went, people talked to him normally and even smiled at his jokes, something that was rarely an occurrence in Konoha. It only took him a day to forget about that village and its hostile people, but everything changed and took a dark turn when he accidentally heard the conversation of the ninjas, whom he was earlier calling his saviors. They never wanted to help him. Help. They didn't even want to keep him alive at all. They wanted to kill him and transfer the beast inside him to someone else's body. Speaking of the beast, Naruto slowly placed a hand on his abdomen and closed his eyes, stopping the tears from falling. I'm Kikbi was the first thought that came into his mind as soon as he closed his eyes. Hello Naruto. Every thought left his mind when he heard the old man call out his name. His voice was very familiar yet completely unfamiliar at the same time. Maybe it was because he sounded just like the old Hokage from Konoha, but unlike that manipulative man, this man's voice had a tinge of warmth in it. It was pleasant on his ears. Why yes, realizing that he had been silent for a while, Naruto decided to answer the old man. Are you okay, my child? For the third time that day, Naruto was surprised by the amount of kindness that these people had within them. Instead of telling him to go away, they were asking about his well-being. He mumbled, clutching his dog plushie closer to his chest. Ito, who has been watching the boy for a while now, grimaced when he saw Naruto recoil back in fear. Why was the boy afraid of them? He didn't know but he wanted to find out. Who were those people? He asked and saw the boy stiffen a little at his question. I don't know. Uncertainty and despair began to brew inside Ito's heart. Then why were they carrying you like that? Did they know? They kidnapped me and were taking me to their village so that they could kill me. Naruto blurted out, pain and shame oozing out of every word that he spoke. All four of them, not a single one was truthful. This sentence caught Ophis' attention. How did he know there were 4 shinobi? The first version of the technique should have modified the memories of anyone whose chakra level wasn't a civilians in the immediate vicinity. It worked on those Kumo nins, so why did it not work on this boy? From what she could tell from his power, his chakra levels were far above that of a normal civilians. Ophis now gave her full attention to the boy, who was crying while clinging to the dog plushie, as though it were a lifeline. Ophis didn't like seeing him cry. It made her feel not right somewhere in her chest. She didn't like that feeling, but she didn't know what to do to make him stop crying. As Ito observed Naruto, he watched his despair replace the uncertainty and soon his heart started melting as he listened to the boy. He knew the boy was speaking the truth. There was no way a convoy of shinobi would carry a bag like that for no reason. They wanted something from this boy. He was about to ask a few more important questions, but stopped when he saw the boy make a run towards the entrance of their inn. Hey! He shouted, but the little boy didn't stop, he just kept running, aimlessly to a destination unknown to everyone. I'll bring him back, Autumn-san. Ito blinked when he heard those words of Ophis, and before he knew it, she too was nowhere to be seen. Ophis! He shouted but got no answer. Oh. Beautiful. A mesmerized Naruto whispered slowly as he basked at the visual in front of him. It was beautiful, even more than the forest behind the Hokage mountain. Lush green grass, fog-filled vale, and a river running through the beds of the mountains above. Not only did this make the scene completely otherworldly, but it also gave him a sense of peace that he had never felt before. In a matter of seconds, this place had provided him something that Konoha couldn't in all those years. Warmth. A small smile blossomed on his lips as drops of warm water fell upon his cheeks from the trees above. His smile turned into a giggle, and that giggle got lost in the fits of laughter when the droplets of water didn't stop flowing down. Tap. The laughs vanished as soon as the sounds of footsteps ruined the serenity of the vale. Who is there? The boy stuttered, fearing that the men might have returned to catch him again. Show yourself, he whispered, this time a little more confident. Blue eyes that were earlier appreciating the beauty of the vale were now affixed to shadows that dominated the other side of the forest. They were scared, frightened of the thought that someone would close them again, but for forever this time. The grass and bushes rustled as did his heart when someone pushed the shrubs away to enter the area. A sense of relief washed over his whole body as he looked at the intruder. He instantly recognized her, she was the girl from that inn. Ophis didn't answer, instead, she just continued to stare at the boy with her curious eyes. The boy was interesting, a lot more interesting than any other human she had met till now. He had this strange aura of mystery and danger around him, just like her. Also, not to mention the fact that he was able to overrule her skill of erasing memories without even doing anything, that just made him even more important in her mind. Who are you? A blunt question left her mouth as she continued to walk close to the boy. Naruto immediately stepped back when he saw the girl walk towards him. Something was wrong with her, and so he, for his own safety and well-being, needed to be away from her. I'm Naruto. I know. I'm not asking that. I'm asking who you really are. The black-haired girl illustrated her question further. Sensing the surroundings, she could decipher that the boy was afraid of her, but yet she did not attempt to calm him down. It wasn't her problem. Who I really am? A thoughtful look cascaded Naruto's face. What was the girl asking? Who he really was? I'm no one. I'm just an ordinary. He stopped midway when the words of that shinobi rang loudly in his mind. We will extract the Kikbi from him and then kill him. No. He whispered to himself. I'm not ordinary. His words drew the attention of Ophis. I'm a monster. Sounding devastated, Naruto glanced at her with the most fragile look he could muster. Go away, he told her. I'm not someone with whom you should talk. Ophis ignored his cries and requests. There was no point in following them. I see. She finally spoke in the most normal voice possible. Nice to meet you, monster. Raising her hand a little, she held it out for the boy. If she could remember, that's how Ito had taught her to interact with people her age, and now was the best time to observe how much she had learned. My name is Ophis and I'm not an ordinary person either. I'm a very powerful dragon. Naruto stopped crying. Huh? What did she mean by being a very powerful dragon? Was this girl joking with him or was she trying to make fun of his misery? Either way, he didn't care enough. What? Ophis blinked at the boy. Why was he looking at her like that? Aren't we playing that childish game of being supernatural creatures? She asked him. The boy finally understood what she was doing. I see you are making fun of me, right? His miserable words sparked something inside Ophis. Go on, do it. I won't say anything. You can say whatever you want. Monsters like me deserves nothing better. With that said, Naruto turned away from her and began to stare at the ravine with his hopeless eyes. Why would I make fun of you? She asked him, curious as to why he would think something like that. It wasn't in her nature to make fun of humans. They were her last hope, after all, at least the good ones were. Because I'm a monster. She interrupted him. No, she whispered as she slowly sat down beside him, her eyes not leaving his face even for a second. It was nice and different, she noted, especially those lines on his cheeks. You are not a monster, at least according to me, you are not. I have seen monsters, I have fought with them. They look nothing like you. Liar. A confused look enveloped Ophis's face. Liar. Why would I lie to you? I'm speaking the truth, human boy. Now that earned her a reaction from Naruto. Faster than she could anticipate, he turned his face towards her and smiled. It was a delicate and pure smile and for some reason, Ophis felt satisfied to be the reason behind it. Human boy. Naruto recited the phrase in the most ridiculous way possible. Why did you call me that? He couldn't help but ask her. What are you? My grandma or something? Human child is a human child, human child. You are one of them. That's why I don't think you are a monster. Ophis answered immediately. If you were one then you would have looked like one, but you don't. So don't try to fool me with these words of yours. Now tell me, how did you manage to dispel my memory erasing technique? She asked him, giving him her undivided attention. Naruto remained silent for a while before he finally smiled at the girl again. You know. Yes. You are a very interesting girl, Ophis. I think I can listen to you forever. The world went blank for Ophis. Forever? She murmured. Eh. Silence claimed the ravine. Forever. Ophis mused as she stared at nothing in particular. Why would he listen to me forever? Does he even know what that word means? She was very confused. Since she didn't understand exaggerations and metaphors, she took the word to mean literally. To her, forever meant forever. How could a human listen to her until the end of time? They couldn't even live that long, and even if they could, why would he do that and not do something else instead? As she pondered over the strange acclamation of the boy, she didn't notice a small tingling feeling that begun to churn in her heart. The seed had been planted, it would only be a matter of time before it sprouted into something beautiful. Over the past few weeks, Uzumaki Naruto had realized this town was nothing like Konoha. He couldn't even breathe without offending someone, the people of this village were far more kind and polite to him. Naruto understood why people would call this place their home. At first, he had thought that it had to do something with him being a guest, but strangely even after a whole month of roaming around aimlessly in town and seeing the same faces every day, the kindness towards him never abated. It increased with each passing day. Adults aside, even the children of this town were very different. They were friendly and welcoming just like their parents and had yet to reject his requests to play with them. Hell, most of the time, he was the one invited to play in the playground. Something that the children of Konoha never even thought of doing. No one here called him a monster. Naruto couldn't help but question it, since almost everyone in Konoha called him one. It was an epithet that had been around with him from the very beginning. He had gotten used to hearing that, much to his shame. It was like a second name for him, and it felt strange when he abruptly stopped being called that. But it feels nice when people use my name. That was true. Naruto never liked being called a monster. It was a name given to him by the people of Konoha. Dottie preferred his actual name, as it was given to him by his parents. It was what they decided to call him, he adored it to no end. For him, it was a priceless memento of his parents, the two most precious people of his life. Although he never had any chance to meet them, Naruto guessed they must have loved him. If they didn't, then they would have never sacrificed themselves for his safety. The mere thought of them and their sacrifice was enough to make him bring him great joy, such was the love he had for his parents. Mom, Dad. Speaking of parents, Naruto couldn't help but remember how nice the owners of that inn had been to him throughout his whole stay, especially the old lady. From bathing him with the nicest soap to serving him the most delicious food, she had done it all and was ready to do it all over again just for his happiness. She had practically adopted him if he had to be honest, and he had no problem with it, except for the fact that he would have to break her kind heart when he would return to his village. Naruto could already imagine the look of anguish she would have on her face when he would go back home. That thought alone was enough to make him wonder, did he really want to do that? No. His heart screamed in grief. Suga didn't deserve to be hurt like that. She was one of the only few people who had actually shown him the kindness and love he had yearned for all his life. She had taken care of him when he needed it the most. Taken him on small trips when he was bored, she had cooked him delicious food when he was hungry, and most importantly, she had called him what he had always been yearning to be called from someone else's mouth. Son. She had called him her son, and for the first time in his life, Naruto felt wanted. He felt like finally he belonged somewhere, and that sensation was extraordinary. It was so amazing, the thought of not returning to Konoha struck his mind for the first time. There hadn't been a day where it didn't cross his mind. The very idea of staying here was both amazing and terrifying at the same time. I should go back. No. He didn't want to go back. He wanted to stay here with Suga. He wanted to embrace her motherly love and care, especially if it meant that he had to forget his birthplace. He would do it in a blink of an eye, he would do it for Ito, Suga, and her. Ophis. A strange, silly and overly possessive girl with hair as black as the darkest night and a face that could rival the moon with its radiance. She refused to leave his side for a moment since they had met by the river. When asked why, she answered that she felt calm and happy beside him, his presence was unique. That left him in a state of confusion. Why would anyone feel calm beside him? He wasn't that special. Unique. Blue eyes wandered to his side and lit up with joy when they saw her sitting quietly beside him, staring at the elegant river that separated her beautiful village into two fractions. As usual, her face was devoid of any expression and was shining in the bright sunlight that pierced the shades of the trees around them, giving it a surreal touch. Are you done, Naruto? Or do you need more time? Her soft voice broke his musing and hauled him back to reality. He trailed off as his mind realized he still hadn't thought of a solution to his predicament. Seeing her friend lost in his thoughts elicited a strange emotion inside her. It was hurting her for some reason. Were emotions capable of that? Ophis didn't know. She had never felt like this before. Wait, she had. She had felt this particular one before, but when? That time, she thought to herself. She began to remember the events that had transpired on that day. I need to go back to Konoha, Ito-san. A painful whisper cut through the air and broke the silence that had consumed the vast room before. Are you sure? An elderly voice tried to fight against the strength of that whisper but fell flat when those blue eyes that they all had started to love began to drizzle drops of colorless liquid, staining the cold floor in their broken hearts. Yes, please Ito-san. Konoha is where I belong. I can't this time. The whimper couldn't complete its journey and died before it could even reach the people who were silently crying their hearts out. A pair of honey brown eyes opened slightly and looked at their source of affection. Naruto, her voice made everyone silent, such was the importance she held in the house and their hearts. Please, her lips quivered in pain. Please don't go. Suga-san, I. Unable to look her in the eyes anymore, the owner of the voice left the room with tears staining each and every tile he walked on. My son. X. That day was one of the disheartening days she had experienced in this strange new world of hers. Normally, the days were filled with laughter and joy. It was then, Ophis realized that just like that old world, her new home wasn't free of disappointment. It was inevitable. Naruto may never realize what his words managed to spur inside her that day. According to what she had read, it was supposed to be an emotion known as sadness. Ophis refused to acknowledge the emotion. In that same book, it was clearly written that you only feel sadness when news or an event that made you unhappy was associated with someone or something you deem precious and close to yourself. So that raised a question in her head. Did she consider Naruto close to herself? No, she didn't. Naruto wasn't that close to her. He was just a strange boy who liked to make fun of her eyes and short hair. A boy who liked to take a stroll around the town with her for no reason. A boy who always patted her head whenever she caught an exotic fish. Maybe, just maybe, he was a little closer to her than she wanted to admit, but that didn't mean she was sad to see him leave. He could have done whatever he wanted to do, but now, things have changed. No longer was he a stranger to her. Now, he's her best friend and she refuses to let him go back to that village. The fact that Suga and Ito would be heartbroken to see him leave as well only furthered her determination to not let him go. I don't know, Ophis. His voice made her turn her gaze to him. I should go back since that's all I've ever known. Another part of me wants to stay here with everyone. I don't. She stopped him. You shouldn't worry about it so much. You can think about it while we play. The small smile she had vanished from her lips when the boy gave her a deadpan look. I can't think while playing with you, Ophis. I have to make a choice, you know. You know, the smile returned as she adjusted herself on the soft green grass beside him. I know. Then stop thinking about it and just play with me. According to her, obeying her suggestion was the most reasonable thing to do at that moment and she certainly believed that Naruto wouldn't argue with her about that. No. Her hopes died a premature death when the boy plainly ignored her suggestion and stood up from his position. I'm going to take a walk in the town. Ophis could have stopped him but she chose not to. For her, Naruto's happiness was her topmost priority. If he wanted to take a walk somewhere then she didn't have any problems with it. He could do whatever he wanted to, as long as he promised to stay with her and listen to her forever. That's all she wanted from him. Sure. She murmured silently and turned away from him. Naruto stared at her for a moment. You know. Ophis immediately turned her eyes back to him and smiled, ignoring the red that began to crawl on her cheeks. She knew what he was about to say but chose to remain silent. You're kind of weird, Ophis. But I like it. There they were, the words that always made her all warm on the inside. She didn't know why, but his smile accompanied by those fascinating words always spurred something odd inside her. Snapping out of her thoughts, she tried to reply but couldn't when she noticed that he was no longer standing there. He is a strange human too. Uo. The walk around the town turned out to be a little complicated for Naruto this time. Why? This time he accidentally left the known area of the village and drifted off to the foreign parts of the village. Although unknown to him, this part of the village wasn't any different from what he had already seen near Tsuga's house. It was quite similar, decorated with the same type of houses and the same types of shops, the only difference being the number of trees and wildlife around it. While the area near Tsuga's home maintained a balance between establishments and the amount of flora and fauna around it, this area, on the other hand, conserved no balance like that. It was random. I should get back to the inn, he told himself, but paused when he realized something important. He still hadn't come up with an answer to Tsuga's question. Naruto had to think of a solution to his dilemma. Otherwise, he would end up hurting the only person who had the decency to show him what the real love of a mother felt like. Gah. He screamed at himself, disappointed with the fact that he couldn't do anything about it. If he decided to stay in Yugakure, sooner or later, the people of Konoha would catch up to him and they would harm Suga. No. He wouldn't let any type of harm befall her. I don't know what to do. Tears began to form alongside his eyes, daring to spill out on the ground at any given moment. Rustle. His heart almost leaped out of his chest when he heard a strange sound coming from the side. Slowly he turned around and gulped as his eyes saw the leaves of the tree move along with a unique silhouette that was hiding behind the glooms of the forest. Thinking that the person was from Konoha, Naruto steeled himself and shouted. "Come out from there, I can see you." The silhouette stopped moving for a while before moving behind another tree. Naruto gulped again. "I said show yourself. I know you're from Konoha, so don't even." His breath hitched in his throat when the person finally decided to reveal themselves, standing an inch or two away from where Naruto was standing. "Suga-san." Naruto's heart trembled with 1,000 different emotions when the old lady smiled at him, her wrinkled and wet cheeks telling him that she was crying a while ago. "Naruto." Her sweet and motherly voice was dangerous. He felt his will and determination crumble in seconds. "Why are you here, Suga-san?" It wasn't a question but a futile attempt of his to evade the sadness and embarrassment that was waiting for him at the end. If she began to argue with him then he had no doubt that he would lose it in an instant. "I was just strolling by, Naruto." Her warm smile and calm demeanor did nothing to hide the lies that she was trying to spew through her voice. They were as clear as the skies above. In another attempt to save him and Suga from further embarrassment, Naruto tried to run away, just like he did in the morning. This time, Suga was quick to react. Before he could understand what was happening, two thin wrinkled hands began to drag him into the darkness of the forest around him. "Suga." The old lady silenced the boy with a little hush and a small smile. "Just remain silent for a while, Naruto," she whispered. "Okay." Naruto did as he was told and with that, a soothing yet awkward silence fell upon the two as they continued to travel deep inside the forest. After traveling for a while, Suga finally reached her desired destination and quickly let go of the child. He looked up at her after being released, grateful to be free from her hold. Here, the elderly woman sat on the ground and motioned Naruto to do the same too. "Please sit, Naruto." Naruto wasted no time and in a flash, he was sitting beside his favorite person, occasionally looking at her face to see any signs of tears. "This is one of my favorite spots to rest." Suga began with her honey voice. "Whenever I feel sad, I come here to rest and enjoy the beauty of this place. Will you take a look around for me?" At the mention of the word beauty, Naruto immediately looked around them and gasped as soon as his eyes took notice of the beauty of the place. It was incredible, even more than the place that he had termed his favorite, which was located alongside the river behind their house. In his short stay in this beautiful town, he had thought he would not see a place as beautiful as that, but Suga clearly surprised him again. Compared to what he was witnessing at the moment, the place on River Bibu's bank felt really ordinary. It astonished him since he couldn't believe so many beautiful locations could exist in one place. "Amazing." Suga smiled at the boy and ruffled his hair gently. "I know. That's why I brought you here, my dear." Just like that, the feeling of euphoria vanished from Naruto's face and was replaced by a sad frown. It hardly hid anything from the elderly woman. "What do you mean by that, Suga-san?" His small lips quivered slightly when the old lady looked at him with the warmest smile he had ever seen. It was beautiful, and the fact that he was going to ruin it soon terrified him. He didn't want to, but he had no control over anything. "You were having trouble making your decision, right?" she asked him and nodded her head when Naruto answered her with a light hum. "That's why I brought you here. I think being here will help keep you calm. I know it will help you to make the right decision." "There is no right decision." Naruto wanted to tell her. But he lacked the courage. No matter what he chose, his decision would ruin her life in one way or another. It would break her heart if he left, but he refused to put her life in jeopardy by staying. So for him, there was no right decision. It was either sacrifice or selfishness. His nervousness must have been noticed by Suga because she immediately stopped him from speaking. "You're nervous right now, Naruto. Look at the scenery around you. Let yourself be calm and then make a choice." Her dry lips formed the warmest smile that they could muster as she began to run his back soothingly. "Oh okay." A serene silence claimed the place as both the old lady and the boy went quiet. "Oh. Sadness." It was a very terrible and irritating emotion to experience, Ophis concluded bitterly as she stared at the river in front of her. No matter what she did, the emotion refused to vacate her heart for some reason. Even the calming sound of the river Bibu was failing to elevate her mood. "I don't want to experience it anymore," Ophis grumbled silently, her mind still trying to filter out the emotion that was the sadness from her heart. "I want to be happy again. I want to smile." Her small hands clenched the grass tightly as another wave of melancholy crammed inside her heart. It was getting annoying now. She wanted to get rid of it. But how? The book that she had been learning emotions from failed to offer any suggestions about eliminating a particular emotion from one's mind. Sure, she could use her memory erasing magic on herself, but that would be considered self-harm, according to the other book that she's reading to learn human behavior. So what should I do? Her mind began to contemplate about possible solutions, but unfortunately, couldn't come up with anything helpful. When it came to humans and their stupid emotions, Ophis was as blank as the surroundings of her old home. Home? Ophis blinked slightly as a strange thought struck her mind out of nowhere. A thought that could possibly lead her to the solution she was searching for. I used to do something to make myself happy whenever I was defeated by that stupid red. What was it? She asked herself as she was sure the emotion that she used to feel whenever she was defeated by that giant idiot was sadness. Sadness was the reason she used to feel terrible in that void, and its byproduct, the loneliness, only made it tough for her to live there. So what managed to keep her in that void for so long? What did she do to make herself feel happy? Hope. Everything became clear in an instant. It was hope that kept her there for so long. The hope of ruling that void once again, the hope of living there once again, and most importantly, the hope of calling that void her home once again. It was that hope which kept her sane in that void. Ophis hummed as she rested her head on the soft patch of grass and closed her eyes gently. Deep in thought, Ophis's lips curved a little as a smile began to form there on her small face. It was beautiful and bright, but most importantly, it was filled with hope. Hope kills sadness. It was a new thing that she learned today. She vowed to remember it in case she ever felt the emotion in the future again. I just need hope, she whispered to herself and finally opened her eyes. Naruto will remain here. He will not go anywhere. Her voice finally gained its usual happy tone as her mind began to think about the things she would do with her best friend once he decides to stay here with her. Ooh. The silence was killing him. The one serene stillness was coming across as a hungry predator now, ready to devour his soul at any given moment. He needed to get rid of the silence. He needed to escape from its embrace. But how? He lacked the courage needed to make a decision. Without it, anything he hoped for would be unachievable. To kill this disturbing silence he needed answers and unfortunately, he had none of them. Naruto. His blue eyes dilated with fear and sadness as a familiar face emerged in the line of his vision. Suga-san, his lips quivered slightly, begging him to allow the sobs to escape from his mouth, but he did not heed their pleas. He already looked weak at the moment and didn't want to cause any more pain or grief to the old lady by allowing more signs of weakness to appear on his face. Don't cry like that, dear. I just want you to be happy. The tears on her face evoked her heartbreak. His own emotions seemed so minuscule compared to hers. They didn't suit her, not at all. He would do anything to ensure she would never cry again. I'm not crying, Suga-san. He tried to ease her worries with a fake smile, but the old lady easily saw through it and her tears began to pour even harder. I'm sorry, Naruto. Her soft yet sorrow-filled words cut through his chest and entrenched themselves into his heart. It's because of me you are crying like this. I'm a terrible and selfish woman. No, you aren't. You are the only person who has ever called me her son. Naruto wanted to tell her, but didn't as he was too overwhelmed by the emotions at that moment. You bring so much joy into my life. I see you as my own son, but I know my selfishness has pushed you away. I only wanted you to be happy and to know the love of a family. The beauty of the place soon vanished as everything became dull for Naruto. Even the ever-beautiful forest of the village was coming across as nothing but a sallow silhouette of sadness. Tears of Suga devoured everything beautiful that was dwelling around them. You didn't say anything wrong, Suga-san. His lips finally parted a little and allowed a few words to flee through them. I was very happy when you called me your son. It was like a dream come true for me. His small arm slithered around the old lady's neck as he hugged her from behind. In my village, no one even calls me by my name. They either call me an idiot or that annoying brat who should be avoided at all costs. So don't blame yourself for calling me your son. It's what I've always wanted. Socializing was incredibly complex and he was very bad at it. Naruto finally comprehended it as he found himself being unable to form any reasonable statement that he could utter to make Suga happy. The amount of sadness and the importance that the conversation carried was making it difficult for him to come up with something to talk about. It was making him nervous, something that his shaking fingers were clear evidence of. Suga must have noticed that too as she slowly wiped away the tears from her face and smiled at the boy. It was a forced smile, but it was enough to ease Naruto's anxiety a little. Okay, she whispered, her eyes staring at the child with the utmost affection. So, as your mother, can I ask you for a favor? It was a futile attempt, Suga knew. Yet still, she decided to give it a last try. Of course. Her smile turned genuine when the boy tightened his hold around her. Please stay with me. Uo. Ito had seen Ophis do many stupid things and learned countless emotions over the past few years, but never had he seen her anxious and serious about anything. Ordinarily, she would just demand whatever she wanted and be done with it. Today, however, something was different. Her usual cold and indifferent facade was nowhere to be seen. It was absent from her face and in its place was blazing a soft look that held the inconceivable amount of sadness hidden within it. Ophis, don't worry. Naruto will come back. He whispered to the girl. Of course, he will. Ophis looked at Ito and nodded at him. He has to. Her eyes dilated a little. He promised to listen to me forever. He can't just break a promise like that. Her voice turned soft as she gently placed herself on the grass again. Of course, my child. Naruto will keep that promise. So. Let's not worry about it anymore and return to our home. In answer, the infinite dragon shook her little head in denial. No. I'm going to wait for Naruto. I'll go home when he comes back with me. Her words once again made Ito realize just how much of an impact Naruto had made on his family during his short stay at their house. From being a stranger staying at their inn to becoming a member of their family, that boy had surprised Ito by his ability to form bonds. It was like he could befriend anyone without even trying. But that ability has a drawback. It made Ito's life a little more complicated as both his wife and daughter were enamored with the blonde. Ophis, I don't think Suga will bring him here first. We can wait for them at home. He once again tried to argue with the girl, but she again shook her head in negative. He will be here. Ito could have argued again, but decided against it after noticing the amount of trust his daughter held in her voice while speaking those words. Alright. Duo. Where is he? The wind picked up the pace, making countless colorful leaves recede down in the crystal clear water of River Bibu. I'm not sure. It was beginning to get dark outside now, and the only source of light she had was the moon above. It was beautiful, she noted idly while staring at it. But I like the sun more. She argued with herself. The sun reminds me of Naruto. Naruto. Her heart sank down in the pool of grief again. Did he really leave? He promised to be there for her for eternity. So now when she needed him, where was he? Ophis wanted to know. He couldn't have no, she refused to entertain such thoughts. He would never leave Suga. And me. Her mind added immediately as there was no way he would leave them alone. They were his family, and one should never leave his family alone. Even if he did, a unique dark energy began to enter her mind, bringing along even darker thoughts with it. I'll just destroy Konoha and bring him back here. She giggled to herself, but that didn't last long as she realized one very important thing. But then he won't be happy with me. If he leaves, that means he likes Konoha more. If he likes Konoha more, then seeing it destroyed by me will make him sad. If he becomes sad, then I will be sad too. I hate feeling sad. I don't want to be sad. Ophis gasped as she kept thinking through her dilemma. But I hate Konoha too. They're taking Naruto away from me. But he likes Konoha. They don't deserve him. She finally stopped and took a deep breath, one that was very needed at that moment. I need to think about it more, I suppose. Her lips curved downward into a sad frown. Naruto. She almost jumped away in surprise when a familiar voice entered her ears. Not wasting a second, she turned around with wide eyes and gasped when she saw him sitting there, looking at her as if she was some kind of a clown. Then Naruto. What? You're here. Of course. Her heart leaped in joy when he flashed her that beautiful smile of his. Where would I go? I promised to stay by your side forever, remember? She gently nodded her head at him, the small smile still at its place on her lips. I will never forget that promise. Fishing was fun, Ophis knew that already after indulging in the activity countless times. But what she didn't know was that the activity was more fun when done with people who you cherished to no end. For her, those people were her family and her best friend Naruto, a boy that she had come to cherish in the past few years. Sure, he had his flaws, but she would be lying if she said she disliked him for that. She couldn't, her heart wasn't capable of doing that. For her, the boy was like an invaluable possession. He was hers and only hers to protect. No one else had any right to do anything with him. Why? Because he had already sworn to be hers for eternity. You are a very interesting girl, Ophis. I think I can listen to you forever. She could still remember his words vividly from the day she had first met him. Those words, those sweet and simple words changed her forever. From wishing to earn back her precious home to wanting to have a family of her own with Naruto on her side, Ophis's mind had changed a lot in the past few years. Before, she only used to think about herself and herself only. Every action of hers was aimed to garner profit for herself, but after meeting these kind people, her mind changed. Now, all she wanted was the safety of her family. They were her everything now, and the place where they would dwell would always be her home. Hey. Naruto's excited shout brought her out of her thoughts and made her turn her gaze towards him. She blinked at the boy when she saw him staring at her with a delighted look on his beautiful face. I think I caught a big fish this time, Ophis. His jovial voice combined with the excited look on his face was contagious and made Ophis flash a smile of her own at him. If words could describe it, she would call the feeling dwelling within her heart something close to happiness. It was brilliant and made her feel all funny on the inside, especially whenever the boy looked at her with that smile on his face. Really? She asked him, only to gasp a little when he grabbed her by the arms and shook her hastily in excitement. Yes. Just look at it. Look. Ophis blinked at the boy, perplexed. How can I look at anything else when you have this cute smile plastered on your face, Naruto? Her lips curled up a little more. There was no way she was going to turn her gaze anywhere away from his radiant grin. She couldn't risk missing even a single second of that smile. It was her favorite thing, after all. Hey Ophis. The fish is over here, you know. Ophis still didn't budge and kept staring at his face. Before she knew it, she was suddenly too close to him. Your smile is very beautiful, Naruto. Her words and hot steady breaths caressed Naruto's cheeks and painted them red in an instant. Oh Ophis, you are. Oblivious to what she was doing to him, Ophis scooted even closer. Now only an inch away from him, she closed her innocent eyes and smiled dazzlingly at him. I think I can stare at it forever. Splash. A dazzling smile vanished from her lips as they parted a little to allow a gasp to escape. Naruto. She whispered and slowly opened her eyes, only to see Naruto sulking on the bank of the river, his clothes all wet from the water of the brook. Look what you've done, Ophis. But she did, and soon, Ophis began to laugh at him, finding his current state funny and cute for some reason. Her giggles only got louder when Naruto began to flail his hands left and right in protest. Boy, don't laugh like that. Her eyes veered off to his face and curved upwards in happiness. But you're looking so cute right now. She used the unusual word again, remembering very well how much her beloved Suga-sen would use it to compliment both of them whenever they dressed in something new or did something that made her happy. From the way she had seen the lady use the word, Ophis had presumed that the word meant something good, and so, she also began to use it whenever she could to compliment Naruto. Hey, I'm not cute. I'm handsome. Ophis blinked at the boy, no doubt surprised by his words. Handsome. She tasted the word in her mouth, trying to find the meaning of it from her past experiences. After rummaging through her memories for a while, she finally found it. But only men are supposed to be handsome, Naruto. You are clearly not a man. She didn't know what she said was right or wrong, but fortunately for her, the reaction that Naruto gave her told her everything. What? I'm a man, Ophis. The boy was appalled by what he was hearing. She doesn't even think that I'm a man. No. That couldn't be the case. Naruto refused to believe it even if it was true. No. His heart and pride shattered into a million pieces when Ophis decided to dispute his claim with that monotone voice of hers. Oi! He yelled at her and splashed a handful of water at her. What are you doing, Naruto? In response, Naruto just pouted at her. Nothing. Don't talk to me now. He whispered and looked at her to gauge her reaction. Of course he groaned when he saw nothing but confusion there. Why? Now, how was he supposed to answer that? Because you made fun of me just now. In the end, he decided to go with light-hearted banter instead of a full-blown argument. But even if I tried to, I could never argue with her. She is too sweet and clueless for that. Naruto knew how hard it was for Ophis to understand the most basic things about socializing, so he never took her words seriously. Even if they hurt his pride from time to time, he never held her accountable for it. Ah. It apparently finally dawned on Ophis. Is it because I can catch bigger fish than you? She asked him, tilting her head to the side in confusion. Of course, she had to mention that too. Naruto whispered to himself, not even a bit surprised that his friend had managed to humiliate him again, without even intending to do so. Sometimes I think she is just acting and humiliates me and everyone else on purpose. It was possible and he couldn't help but think about it. Naruto. Naruto blinked and looked away in surprise when he realized that he had yet to answer her question. No, of course not. Why would I be upset about that? He blurted out and squeaked out an awkward laugh at the end of his statement, something that only confused the dragon girl further. Then, tell me, when did I make fun of you? Or are you just angry at me because I was laughing at you earlier? Ophis' voice reduced into a whisper, and before she knew it, she was already thinking about everything that had transpired in the span of the last few hours, expecting to find something that explained the boy's behavior. Unfortunately, she found nothing, but luckily for her, Naruto decided to speak and save her the trouble of going through all those memories again. Nope, the boy answered, his small hands trembling a bit as he tried to climb up to the wooden deck again. He groaned as he managed to settle in his previous position on the deck. Was just upset because you said that I'm not a man. His eyes veered away from her face, and his lips formed an adorable pout as he finished his statement. Huh? Ophis' response was predicted, but that didn't stop a sigh that left Naruto's mouth when he saw her reaction. You forgot already? Ophis shook her head negatively. No. I remember it very well but can't think of a reason for you to be angry about it. Her answer startled Naruto. What are you saying? It was very rude of you, Ophis. The dragon girl tilted her head to the side, something that had become a common occurrence whenever she found herself confused by the things or people around her. How? She couldn't help but voice out her confusion. Because you said I was not a man, Ophis. But that you are not. Naruto's self-respect, of which a mere sliver remained in his mind, left his body as soon as Ophis uttered those words. Ophis he was about to argue with the girl again, but before he could do that, the girl surprised him with her next words. "You're a boy, Naruto. A 12-year-old boy." Now, everything clicked in his mind, and soon a small smile blossomed on his face as he glanced at his friend, who still had that cute expression plastered on her beautiful face. He breathed a sigh of relief, no doubt delighted with the fact that his friend still considered him a man, even if it meant being called a boy by her. "You are so clueless, Ophis." His teasing words earned him a glare from the girl. "I'm not clueless, Naruto." Ophis huffed as she crossed her hands beneath her chest. "Sure." Naruto teased further, widening his grin. Ophis's glare deepened along with the pout on her lips. "Now you are making fun of me." It wasn't her mistake that she was from a different world, a place where she had no one to tell her about basic human emotions and the way they communicated with each other. For her, everything that she saw around her was new, and she always tried her best to understand them as much as she could for the sake of her family. Why? Because I want to be like them. Ophis wanted to feel normal around her precious people, and if it meant learning everything from daily experiences, then she was ready for it. "Oh, I'm sorry, Ophis." Naruto's soft voice brought her out of her thoughts. "I wasn't trying to make fun of you." His smile eased her worries, and before she could notice what was happening, she found herself smiling at him. "It's okay." Ophis shuddered when that unknown sensation returned and shook her body from the inside. "I know you weren't trying to be rude to me." Her lips parted and allowed a gasp of air to escape from her mouth when that sensation filled her heart with warmth. "Anyway," Naruto whispered and wiggled his head left and right to get the remaining water out from his hair. "Let's head back home. Suga Bachan said she was going to make miso ramen for us." His excited tone and the bright smile that was lingering on his face only made Ophis's state worse, intensifying that pleasant warmth in her. "Oh, okay. You okay, Ophis?" "Why, yes." Naruto leaned over and began to analyze her face, all while being completely oblivious to the effects that his action was having on her. "You seem fine now." He paused. "But I'm sure your whole face was red a moment ago." He whispered. "I don't know," Ophis answered, being genuine with her friend. For her, everything that was happening to her was odd, and it had been going on like this for a while now. She didn't know what was the cause of it, but it only seemed to happen whenever she was with Naruto. It must have been due to the heat still, she had no proper assessment of the situation, so she let it slide, unsolved once again. A small smile bloomed on the infinite dragon's face as she heard Naruto yawn. "Are you tired?" she asked, hoping that he would say yes as she was getting tired of fishing too. Sure, it was a fun activity, but as her beloved father says, nothing is fun when it's done excessively. "Yeah, and I need to dry my clothes too. All thanks to you." The smile got wider. "I'm glad I made you happy, Naruto," she whispered, ignoring the look Naruto was giving her. "I wasn't complimenting, never mind." A defeated sigh that Naruto let out confused Ophis a little, but she didn't question it as she thought it was a mere expression of exhaustion. "Okay, let's go." But that said, she grabbed his hand and began to walk toward their home. Home. The warm feeling flooded her heart yet again. Duo. Sadness. It was an emotion that used to be an integral part of Suga Kawajishi's life. Born in a rich family, Suga initially never knew about things such as sadness and suffering. For her, they were some kind of a foreign entity that she refused to believe in. Even when she used to see people sad and broken, she merely believed they were just being miserable for the sake of gaining empathy. After all, who couldn't solve a crisis if they tried hard? All they needed was a little money, and she was never short of that. For her, money was a resource that she could use as much as she wanted to without ever worrying about it being depleted, and it stayed like that even after she married the love of her life. Ito Kawajishi. Her husband was even richer than her, and he, as expected of him, never let her feel like she was being denied any luxuries. To her immense surprise, he even introduced her to things that she didn't even know existed in the world. Even during the rebuilding of their beloved village, when everyone was either broke or was on the verge of becoming penniless, her husband handled everything marvelously and kept their fortunes safe. Seeing how Ito handled everything, Suga had thought her life was going to remain the same, filled with happiness and luxuries, but everything changed when they received a certain piece of devastating news. They couldn't have a child. To say Suga was disappointed would be an understatement. She was disappointed, more with herself than anyone else. Why? Because she was the reason they couldn't have a child of their own. Her womb was incapable of carrying a child. Her husband, on the other hand, was perfectly fine and could have a child with anyone else if he wanted to, but because of her, he couldn't even do that. Whenever she tried to tell him to leave her, he refused her pleas, saying that his love for her was more important to him than having a child. During that period of her life, Suga learned a very valuable lesson. Money was nothing but a useless commodity if you had no reason to live. Sure, she was rich and had a husband who loved her dearly, but a part of her always knew that her life would always be miserable due to the lack of a child in it. Without a child of her own, the money she possessed was useless as there was no one she could spoil with it. While other people enjoyed their lives with their beloved children, she was left with nothing but a hollow feeling as she watched them from afar. We are back, Opa-chan. A small but genuine smile blossomed on Suga's lips as she heard two familiar voices enter her house. Ophis, her smile got wider. Naruto. And brighter as she saw them walk towards her, one being her usual clueless elf while the other drenched in water. Oba-chan. A familiar warm feeling filled Suga's heart as Naruto threw himself in her arms. Yes, my dear. She asked, giving zero thought to the water that had stained her clothes too. For her, nothing was more important than her Naruto. He was everything that she wanted in her life. She threw me in the river. Mustering the best puppy eyes he could, Naruto complained about Ophis to his Tsuga-san and was very satisfied when the lady turned her towards Ophis. Ophis Tsuga called the girl and sighed in defeat when she got no response from her. At least say something, dear, she whispered, hoping to get a reaction out of her somehow. Tsuga's struggles turned out to be effective as the girl lowered her to hide her face from the lady. Are you angry with me, Tsuga-bachan? Ophis's voice was soft and her face had hurt written all over it. If there was one thing that she hated in this world then it was making her parents angry at her. Although very rare, it still happened and she didn't like it at all. It made her feel immensely saddened, especially when she was the reason behind their anger. Why would I be angry at you, dear? Tsuga smiled. You are my sweet little angel and I can never be angry at you or Naruto. When Tsuga finished speaking, her attention moved to the boy in front of her. You both are all I have. With that said, she hugged the boy even tighter. Her children might not understand it now, but as they would grow up, she was sure they would understand just how much they meant to her. They were the light of her life, something that had given her a reason to live, and she would be damned if she hurt them or let them get hurt by anyone else. Oba-chan, I can't breathe. Tsuga's eyes shot wide open as she realized how much pressure she was applying on poor Naruto. I'm really sorry, dear. In an instant, she unwrapped her arms from his body and began to analyze his face for any discomfort. It's okay, Naruto whispered, wincing slightly as the pain came and went at regular intervals. Looking up, he saw that Suga was still looking at him, her eyes filled with worry and tears. Oi, why are you crying? He asked her. I hurt you, Naruto. I'm sorry. Naruto blinked at her, no doubt surprised by what he was hearing. Hey. He whispered. Who told you that I was hurt? A wave of red covered his cheeks as he continued. I actually like the H-hug, you know. His eyes moved away from her face, fearing that she might see embarrassment within them. Really? The light red hue on his cheeks turned dark. Why yes. He whispered, his stuttering and blush hiding little to nothing about the embarrassment that he was going through at that moment. Cute. Before any of the two could continue, Ophis decided to intervene in the awkward conversation to give her own 2 bits about Naruto's apparent state. She liked when he behaved like that. It made him look even more pleasing to her eyes. I'm not cute, Ophis. Face still covered in the red hue of embarrassment, Naruto managed to yell at the girl somehow. I'm cute. Ophis finished his statement for him. You're cute. Isn't he, Suga-bachan? The girl looked at the lady who was looking back and forth between her and Naruto. Yes. A small smile crept up on her small face as Ophis heard Suga's answer. It was exactly what she wanted to hear. See, Naruto? Suga-san thinks you are cute. She looked at the boy, her face doused in pride and arrogance. Naruto paused, finding it hard to retort back at the obvious jab. It continued like that for a few more seconds before he realized something significant. Suga-bachan is an old lady. It was his time to be smug now. Of course, she would find me cute because I'm a child. His lips stretched out to form a smile, but one that had to retract immediately when Ophis smiled at him in return. He called you old, Suga-bachan. Sweat covered Naruto's face as soon as Ophis uttered those words. I didn't. Naruto tried to correct his mistake, but fortunately for him, instead of being angry at his comment, Suga took it with a smile on her face. Oh, but I'm old, Ophis. The lady whispered to the girl and giggled when she blinked at her. It was always cute when her little girl did that. For Suga, it symbolized the innocence of Ophis as she was still trying to wrap her head around the concept of human emotions. But I heard a lady say that women don't like when someone calls them old. Ophis was confused. According to what she had heard from a couple of ladies of her town, her Tsuga-san should have been angry at Naruto right now, but she was far from being angry at him. Instead, she was laughing and hugging him as if he had said something nice to her. Humans are so complex. At first, she had thought that understanding them would be easy, but now that she was trying to do so, Ophis had begun to realize just how wrong she was. Humans were far from being a group of simple beings, they were complex and interesting. And that's why I want to understand them even more. A small smile slithered its way to her lips as she shifted her eyes towards the mother and son duo. The spectacle of them hugging each other and laughing was filling her heart with a very familiar emotion. Happiness. It was her favorite emotion and no matter how much she experienced it, she could never get enough of it. What are you looking at, Ophis? Ophis blinked when she was hauled back to reality by none other than her Naruto. Nothing. She answered, becoming a little confused when that warm feeling from earlier returned. She loves to see us happy, Naruto. Right, Ophis. The infinite dragon's mind went haywire as soon as she heard that word. Love, she tasted the word on her tongue and smiled when she realized that she liked it. It was pleasant to use and hear. But I don't know its meaning. The small smile vanished from her face, replaced by a sad frown as she began to think about possible scenarios where she might have heard about the meaning of the word. Unfortunately, she found none of such scenarios. What is love? In the end, she accepted the letdown and decided to ask her mother instead. Ophis was sure Suga must know everything about the word, after all, she just used it a while ago. Love? Suga asked Ophis and blinked when the girl furiously nodded her head positively. You don't know about love, Ophis. She murmured, her voice filled with sadness and confusion. Sadness because if what she heard was true then that meant Ophis had never known what she was feeling whenever she had spent her time with them. For her, it must have been a very strange experience as Suga was sure the girl must have felt the emotion but didn't know what it was. She was also confused by the question because if Ophis didn't know what love was, then why didn't she ask her about it earlier? As if Ophis knew what Suga was thinking, the dragon girl decided to bring the old lady out of her thoughts by a small puff of air that she let out of her mouth. HMPH. If I knew what it was then why would I have asked you about it? She whispered, her monotone voice exhibiting a little bit of emotion within it for a moment. You are right, dear. The old lady smiled at the girl, no doubt amused by the emotion she was showing on her face. It was rare for Ophis to do that, but whenever she did, Suga couldn't help but gush about it. After all, the girl looked very cute with a face filled with emotion rather than her usual blank face. Now for your question, well love is very simple. It was not, but for the sake of Ophis's comprehension, Suga decided to go with an easy explanation. Simple? Suga nodded her head. Yes. It's what you feel when you spend time with someone you like being around, like your family. The lady didn't expect Ophis to understand it that much, but the girl surprised her when she began to smile at her. So the warm feeling I feel when I look at Naruto's smile is love. It was a simple and innocent question if you looked at it from Ophis's perspective, but unfortunately, the two other occupants of the room took it differently. For them, the question was unexpected and stunned them into silence instantly. Though Ophis Suga was the first to overcome the shock. You feel something warm inside when you look at Naruto's smile. She asked the girl, only to gasp in surprise when the girl nodded her head positively. Yes. Still shocked, Suga decided to ask a few more questions. Do you feel the same when you look at us? She inquired, hoping that the girl would say yes. No, Ophis whispered, her eyes wandering around to find Naruto's face that was hidden between Suga's arms. I only feel it when I see his face. Her eyes lit up with happiness when she finally found his face. It was cute, she noted for the 1000th time that day. I see, the awkwardness in Suga's voice didn't go unnoticed by Ophis, who immediately blinked at her, confusion shimmering within her eyes. Well, that means you love Naruto. Right before she could complete her statement, Naruto rapidly interrupted her, heavily flustered. Suga Oba-san. The boy yelled, his face doused in the shameful color of red. What are you saying? Ophis is just confused. He tried to argue with the lady, but his attempt turned out to be futile when Ophis invalidated his argument in a second with but a single simple question. What's wrong with me loving you, Naruto? Both the mother and son glanced at the girl and were surprised to see an irritated Ophis. Don't you like it when I love you? For her, love was a simple emotion, as her Tsuga-san had told her. So now, when she was watching both of them act oddly, Ophis couldn't help but be confused about it. You don't understand what you are saying, Ophis. The confusion inside her increased when she heard Naruto's words. Huh? Tsuga-san said that the warm feeling was love, so that means I love you. What's more to understand about it? She asked the boy. Love it's Naruto paused, gulping loudly when he noticed that all the attention was on him now. It's his eyes squinched shut when the silence in the room began to taunt him, challenging him to blurt out something stupid in front of his family. Ag. He yelled, not liking the fact he was silenced by none other than Ophis. I don't know. I'm going outside to play with Amaya. To save himself from further embarrassment, he untangled himself from Tsuga's arms and began to run towards the exit, being careful not to look behind where a stunned Tsuga and perplexed Ophis were staring at his back. Why did he run away? Did I say something bad, Bachan? Looking back at the lady, Ophis asked, finding everything that had just transpired very confusing. No, well Tsuga was having a hard time digesting the situation herself, she still didn't waste any time in answering Ophis' question. He was just embarrassed, Ophis. Embarrassed? Why? Now it was Tsuga's time to become silent again. How was she supposed to answer that without dying of embarrassment herself? She knew parenting was hard, but this was torture. Never in her life had she thought she would be confronted by a challenge this humiliating. But I have to help her understand these things. It's my duty as a mother. Steeling herself for what was about to come next, Suga raised her eyes and looked at Ophis. Because you said that you love him. She didn't know how she managed to say it in one breath, but after she was done, Suga felt like she had climbed the highest mountain in the world. But going by your explanation, I do love him. Suga sulked in defeat. It was her mistake from the beginning. She had thought Ophis wouldn't ask more about the topic of love after hearing a small explanation from her, but God, she was wrong. Infinite if she had to describe the amount of curiosity the girl had in her mind, then that word was apt for it. She was like an infinite chasm of curiosity, eager to absorb as much information as she could. Suga-bachan. Noticing that she had yet to answer the girl's question, Suga flashed her an apologetic smile. Sorry, I got distracted, she whispered before preparing herself for another flood of encounters with embarrassment. You see Ophis, love can be of different types. It has no definite meaning and usually changes according to the relationship two individuals have between them. She paused to see whether the girl was listening or not and was satisfied when she noticed that Ophis was paying attention to her. What you just said to Naruto meant that you love him in a romantic way. That's why he was so embarrassed. What does love in a romantic way mean? Whispered Ophis, face tilted and the skin around her eyes and forehead crinkled in concentration as she tried to revisit her memories to solve yet another conundrum. Suga's sweat dropped. It means that you want to marry him and have a family with him in the future. Just like I did with Yurito-san. But that's what I want. Huh? Suga froze, everything in her mind coming to a halt. Dear, could you please repeat that? I think I might have misheard you. There's absolutely no way that she said what I think she just said, right? She thought inwardly, while on the outside sporting an unnatural smile that held an undertone of confusion and mortification. Alas, unfortunately there was nothing that could have prepared her for what Ophis asseverated next. I said that I want to have a family with Naruto because he promised to stay by my side for eternity. And for that to happen, I have to start a family with him, right? Asserted Ophis, voice even and plain as if she was merely chatting about the weather. Oh, Ophis dropping her jaw and subconsciously muttering this in discombobulation was all Tsuga could do to restrain her haywire thoughts from exploding into reality. Anyway, I'm hungry now. Can you please prepare the fishes that I and Naruto had caught earlier, Bachan? Ophis asked, unmindful of the stupor her prior statement had sent the old lady into, as if it were some everyday insignificant utterance that could be glossed over without any second thought. All Tsuga could do was vacuously nod in stupefaction. As sure. The place Ophis called home was beautiful. Enveloped by a lush blanket of greenery, the myriad of enchanting hot springs that adorned her town were truly mesmerizing, casting a spell of mystique over the entire area. I want to live here forever, Ophis whispered to herself, her eyes basking in the charm of her home. It is beautiful, she added, her small lips curving upward into a cute smile that conveyed the happiness surging inside her heart. Her gaze shifted to the row of shops, elegantly positioned in the heart of the town. Owned by different individuals, there was nothing that those shops did not have. Anything Ophis desired, those shops had, except for Naruto. Unfortunately, Naruto was a unique luxury and was not available for purchase in any store. Where is he, anyway? Her smile disappeared from her face, replaced by a frown as she started pondering over what he had told her in the morning. I'll return by evening. The boy had gone to a nearby town with their father to purchase supplies for their inn. Initially, she had offered to do the job, confident in her ability to complete it right away. However, the father and son duo dismissed her suggestion with laughter, leaving her alone all by herself. HMPH. A cute pout formed on her lips. I had told them I could have done it in a few minutes, but they didn't listen, the pout deepened. Now I have to wait for Naruto until evening. If there was anything she hated more than Kumo and Konoha, it was Naruto not being on her side. Over the past few years, she had grown used to having him by her side, and when he wasn't there, she felt empty. Please hurry back, Naruto. With a heavy sigh of longing, Ophis adjusted herself on the grass and began to scan the area around the shops again, desperately searching for something captivating. Her quest for something intriguing continued until it came to an abrupt halt as her eyes landed on something peculiar. The board. Hidden in the shadows that lurked behind the beautiful ornament shop of Arakawa, a wooden board lay there. Adorned with numerous scratches and patches of dust, the board appeared worn and discarded, as if one of the locals from her town had cast it aside. Perplexed by the presence of the board, Ophis squinted her eyes to get a clear look at it, eager to see what was written on it. Not for children. A slight frown formed on her lips as she softly whispered the words engraved onto the wooden plank. Not for children. The frown grew more pronounced as a vivid memory from the past started to flood her mind. Children. That's what the girl had called Ophis when she attempted to snatch Naruto away from her grasp. I despise that insignificant human girl, Ophis muttered, irritation dripping from her voice. The way she looks at Naruto is infuriating. Her eyes narrowed slightly as flames of anger and sadness flickered within them. Maiko. That was the name of the girl who was slowly attempting to ruin her perfect life. It had only been a few months since Ophis and Naruto had met her in the park, but the girl had already become a good friend to Naruto. But that isn't the problem. The issue lay in Maiko's persistent efforts to sway Naruto away from her. Ophis didn't need to read any books to understand what the girl was trying to do. A single glance into her eyes was enough for Ophis to know Maiko's intentions. She wanted to be Naruto's best friend. The frown returned, bringing with it a rush of memories from the past when the girl had senselessly ridiculed Ophis. Amidst the bitter remembrances, a particular memory struck her mind with great force. Cruel were the only words Ophis could utter before her eyes widened and her mind plunged into the deep abyss of her memories. Flashback. Hey Naruto, Ophis mumbled, hoping to catch the attention of the tall blonde boy who was standing in front of her. I want to go home. I don't like it here. Not getting any reaction from the boy, she attempted again, only to be disregarded once more as he carried on chatting with his new friends. New friends? Ophis's lips twitched and contorted into a sorrowful frown as her eyes gazed at the scene before her. It was truly heartbreaking to witness. Naruto, a person who never used to leave her alone, was now ignoring her for some new people that he had met a few months ago. He used to be her best friend, or at least that's what she believed. Unfortunately, it seemed as though he was slowly drifting away, erasing almost all memories of her in the process. Ophis didn't like that. She hated that. Is she always there with you, Naruto? Ophis's gaze returned to the group when she heard Maiko ask Naruto something. As she looked at them, she couldn't help but shake the feeling that something was off about Naruto. He was not smiling at her, nor was he immediately responding to the girl's question, as he usually did with everyone else. It was as if he were purposefully ignoring her question. Yes. Soon, Naruto answered the question, but Ophis could sense the uneasiness inside him. He clearly hesitated to respond, especially with so many people present. She had read in a book that when someone was embarrassed about something, they would try to stall the topic for as long as they could. Is he embarrassed because of me? Ophis didn't want to entertain that thought, but the more she looked in his eyes, the more she saw the tinge of embarrassment hiding within them. Ha. The sound of Maiko's laughter filled Ophis with unease. They were shallow and had a sense of something odd attached to them. It seemed like she was laughing just to hurt her. Unfortunately, it was working, as Ophis was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. Hey, why are you laughing? Ophis is a great friend of mine. Hope flickered within Ophis's heart when she heard Naruto's words. He was defending her, and that fact alone filled her with happiness. Perhaps she had misjudged him, Naruto still considered her a great friend. Friend? Maiko's face as she said that word made Ophis recoil for some reason. She had the power to obliterate the girl's very existence at that moment, but she refrained from doing so. Why? Because Naruto considered her a friend. She looks like your little sister, Naruto. The words that followed were far from gentle. They stunned both Naruto and Ophis for a moment. What do you mean? Ophis looked at Maiko as Naruto asked her to clarify her statement further. She is too small to join us, Naruto. She looks like your little sister. Ophis was confused by what she had just heard. Small. She thought to herself, not understanding what was wrong with being petite. As an immortal dragon, it was natural for her to retain her youthful appearance for as long as she desired. Also, in a book she had read that men and boys preferred young girls. So, what Maiko had just said was not making any sense to her mind. You mean young? Naruto's words snapped her out of her daze, and she blinked in confusion again. Yes. She is too young to play with us. Maiko's words were followed by a judging gaze at Ophis from her side. Seriously, take a look at her, she hasn't aged at all since I first saw you two a few years ago. Ophis tilted her head in confusion for a moment before blinking at the girl as her words began to make sense in her mind. Age, the girl was talking about her age, not her petite body. Maiko was making Naruto see the differences between her and them. Ophis, however, was unfazed as she was aware that Naruto never concerned himself with such things. To him, her mere presence was more than enough. Her age, appearance, and true identity carried no significance in his eyes. Hey, don't call her small. Ophis smiled as Naruto uttered those words. Maybe she will grow taller in the future. Just like that, the smile vanished as reality dawned on her. He does think about it. Ophis realized that Naruto might not show it on the outside to keep her from feeling sad and alone, but he was curious and alert about her lack of growth compared to humans. Does he think that I'm odd? Ophis couldn't help but ask herself that question. As far as she knew him, he was a very carefree and kind person. He meant everything to her. So, if he truly felt unsettled because of her lack of progress, it would deeply sadden her. She always wanted to see him smile, because it made her smile too. I hope so, Naruto. Stop. She is fine, Maiko. As their argument continued, Ophis remained silent, overwhelmed with confusion and sorrow. Flashback. HMPH. Ophis pouted once more, feeling a surge of anger towards that girl. She was the cause of her inability to have a proper conversation with Naruto ever since. Since that day, she couldn't help but constantly dwell on the differences between herself and humans. First and foremost, she was immortal, whereas humans were temporary, fated to perish one day or another. And her Naruto was no exception. He will eventually die as he grows older. The pout on her face transformed into a sad frown as those words left her lips. She hated the painful reminder that the people she cherished would inevitably leave this world before her very eyes. Sometimes, she couldn't help but think that her immortality was more of a curse than a blessing. However, in those moments, she would be reminded of the fleeting nature of human existence, how they would meet their end abruptly, never getting the chance to experience great moments with their loved ones. Ophis didn't want to die. The concept of death repulsed her. How could she let herself perish and leave her cherished home in the clutches of that menacing crimson beast? She needed to take it back, and for that she needed to live. But what about Ito and Suga-san? She whispered, fondly recalling the beautiful couple who had showered her with unconditional love, expecting nothing in return. What about Naruto? She felt her heart ache as she tried to imagine their demise. She couldn't. Even the mere thought of their death evoked anger inside her. Will I ever be able to forget them? Of course, her home was the one thing she desired the most. However, Ophis couldn't help but wonder how she would fare in that place without these people in her life. They were now close to her heart and she wished to keep them with her forever. You know, I can listen to you forever. The wave of nostalgia washed over her as she recalled the unforgettable words of her best words. She had never considered it since the first time she heard him say those words, but how could Naruto fulfill his promise if he wouldn't be able to live as long as her? He was a human, a being destined to die before her. Then, how would he be able to listen to her forever? I can give him eternal life, Ophis whispered to herself, considering the idea of granting him immortality by making him a part of her. The thought of making Naruto immortal filled her with both excitement and dread. She knew there would be consequences, but the idea of never losing him was tempting too. That way we will always be able to cherish each other for eternity. A small smile curled at the corners of her lips as she began to envision a life where he would always be there for her. But what if he becomes bored of me? This question instantly crossed her thoughts. From what she understood, humans tended to grow bored with things they already possessed. So, what could prevent Naruto from feeling the same way about her? Nothing. And that was one of the main reasons she didn't want to make him immortal. Ophis feared that her thoughts would become a reality. HMPH. She huffed in exasperation, turning her head away from the bustling market. It's so confusing, and I don't like feeling confused. Her eyes then began to look around for something else, something that wouldn't make her think about her future. After searching for a while, she finally found what she was looking for. A road to the library. With a sense of excitement, she stood up from her place and began to walk towards the familiar path that would lead her to one of her most favorite destinations. Uo. The library in her village was quite small if you asked Ophis. Compared to the libraries in nearby major villages, the library in Yugakure was nothing more than a building consisting of 3 rooms. The first room was dedicated to the kind lady who warmly welcomed visitors into the building. The second room was designed for the storage of books, while the last room was set up for the simple pleasure of reading them. Even though it was small, Ophis adored this library more than the larger ones she had encountered in her travels. Why? Because it was located in her hometown. Welcome, my little angel. As she entered the building, Ophis's smile widened with delight as she saw the old lady extending her arms for a heartfelt embrace, warmly welcoming her from the other side of the table. It was a daily occurrence, but she could never grow tired of the love the lady showed her. Thank you, Hitomi-san, she replied gracefully, surrendering to the warm embrace of the elder lady. She could never refuse her hugs because it would leave the woman feeling unhappy, and the fact that she also found warmth in them gave her another reason to indulge in them. Did Naruto not come with you? Hitomi asked the girl, unaware that the boy had left her alone in the morning. In response, Ophis pouted at the lady, conveying her feelings without saying a word. However, Ophis still chose to express her thoughts in words. Ito-san and he went on a trip, leaving me alone, she whispered, her voice filled with sadness and frustration. Hitomi chuckled at the girl's response and the expression on her face. Sometimes, she would completely forget how possessive Ophis was about Naruto. Anyone with eyes could see the deep connection she had with the boy. I understand, she murmured, tenderly brushing Ophis' hair to soothe her. It's okay, my precious. I'm sure he will return soon. Of course he will, Ophis exclaimed with confidence as she gazed at the lady. If he doesn't, I will bring him back here in an instant, she added, her expression turning serious. While Ophis was being serious, Hitomi couldn't help but laugh out loud at the girl's warning, especially when she looked that cute and angry at the same time. Of course, dear, she gently ruffled the girl's hair once more. So, what kind of book would you like to read today? Her question was met with a thoughtful gaze from the girl. Ophis remained silent for a while, pondering over what she wanted to read today. I don't know, she finally answered, unable to think of a book she wanted to read. She had already read many books from the library, and the rest that were left seemed boring. Sure, she could ask Hitomi-san for access to the other corner of the library, where most of the men went. However, she was sure that the lady would decline her request by giving the same reason again. It's not for children, dear. Not for children. Ophis' smile faded as those words echoed in her mind. Why did everyone treat her like a child? She was an adult, even older than the village itself. She wanted to do things that adult people around her did, but no one would allow her that. In the past, she had considered altering her appearance to that of an adult, but she worried that it would reveal her true origin to everyone. Sure, she could change her appearance gradually over time, just like humans do as they age. However, it would require a lot of effort as she would always need a picture to inspire her for how she would look. While Ophis was lost in thought, Hitomi noticed a hint of sadness on Ophis' face. Are you feeling alright, dear? She asked, concerned that something was troubling the girl. She had rarely seen Ophis so lost in thought, especially with a hint of sadness etched on her cute face. I'm fine, Hitomi-san. Hitomi could sense the underlying unease. Ophis was still terrible at lying. No, something is bothering you, sweetheart, she argued, hoping that the girl would share her concerns with her. If those children were causing trouble for her again, Hitomi would not hesitate to complain to their parents once more. The children in her town were a real nuisance, especially for Ophis. Ophis paused for a moment, contemplating whether it was appropriate to ask the lady about the matter. After considering, she decided to break the silence and inquire about it. Do you think I'm strange, Hitomi-san? She asked, her voice as soft as a whisper. There were a few things that made Ophis feel sad, and being called strange was one of them. She wanted to be like everyone else, like her Naruto. Of course not, my dear. Hitomi replied instantly. She didn't understand why the girl had asked her that question, but it was heartbreaking for her to witness Ophis in such a state. Then why does that girl call me strange? Ophis was confused. If Hitomi-san didn't find her appearance strange, then why were Maiko and the other children always talking about it? She was petite and looked younger than the others. Ooh. Maiko. Hitomi couldn't help but burst into laughter when Ophis finally exposed the identity of the culprit. Of course, it's her, she chuckled, barely able to contain her amusement. Don't take her seriously, dear. Maiko loves to tease others. Her laughter refused to die down as Ophis blinked at her and pouted. But she always calls me a child, Ophis argued, striving to convey her point to the lady. In response, Hitomi gently pinched Ophis's cheek, prompting a blank expression from the infinite dragon. Because you're a child, darling. Don't you agree? The elderly woman chuckled at the young girl. Ophis quickly shook her head from side to side. No, she objected, astonished that even the elderly lady was agreed with those children. I'm just like Naruto, she proudly declared. Naruto is a child too, dear. Ophis was taken aback by Hitomi's remark. Huh? Her head tilted in confusion. Naruto was not a child. The kids on the ground only called her that. For them, she was the only one unworthy of playing with them. They don't refer to him as a child, though, she informed Hitomi, hoping that the woman would provide her with a suitable response. Because he is tall, Hitomi replied. She didn't want to make the girl sad, but that was the truth. For some inexplicable reason, Ophis stopped to grow as soon as she joined the village. While everyone around her age experienced significant growth, she seemed to defy the natural process of aging. But I'm the same age as him, Ophis countered with a lie. While she loved the lady, she had no reason to tell her about her real age. It's the way he looks, dear. He grew up while you didn't. Ophis remained silent for a while before opening her mouth again. But growing up is stupid. I like the way I look now. She murmured, telling no lie this time. Ophis actually adored her current form. It made her look younger and she absolutely loved it. Ahaha, the lady couldn't help but laugh at Ophis's response. Moments like this were the very reason why she adored the little girl so much. She was too innocent and curious for their war-torn world. Hey, don't laugh and tell me how to make them stop calling me that, Hitomi-san. They will stop when you'll eventually grow up, Ophis. But what if I don't grow up? Ahaha. Ooh-oh. Ophis. Ophis's face lit up with joy and warmth when a familiar sound reached her ears. It was him, there was no doubt about it. Naruto, she didn't even need to turn around to greet him as the boy flew past her and stopped in front of her, smiling at her with a mischievous grin like a fox. "What are you doing here all alone?" Naruto asked the girl, confused as to why she was sitting by herself in such an isolated place. As far as he knew her, she liked to hang out at places filled with people. So, it was confusing to see her all alone in the park. Ophis glanced away from him, attempting to conceal her eyes. She was aware that he would notice her distress if he caught a glimpse of them. In her opinion, it was one of his most intriguing abilities. "Nothing," she whispered, her voice devoid of emotion, mirroring the expression on Naruto's face. "Boy, come on, tell me." "Nothing." Naruto sighed and decided to give up for the time being. He knew that if she didn't want to tell him something, she wouldn't share anything anytime soon. Smiling to himself, he sat down beside her on the bench. "So, how has your day been without me?" he asked her. Ophis didn't have to think twice about her answer. "Boring," she replied. There was no way she was going to have a great day without him by her side to make her smile. His presence, alongside Ito and Suga, was what made this world tolerable for her. Without them, the world was nothing but a blank space to live in, much like her old home. Naruto slumped in disappointment at her blank reply. "Come on, Ophis, you need to make new friends, you know." He entreated her, hoping that the girl would listen to him because she was in dire need of new friends. Apart from him, she had no other friends to talk to. He was the only person she had to hang out with. "I've tried," the black-haired girl murmured in a defeated tone. "But they all refuse to play with me because of how I look." She finished her words with a gentle tug on Naruto's shirt. "Even you have stopped playing with me, too." Her eyes finally turned towards him, sadness shimmering within them. "When?" Naruto was shocked by what he had just heard. "I still play with you, Ophis. You are my best friend," he argued, finding it hard to believe that she was blaming him for something he didn't do. "You're always playing with Maiko and her friends," Ophis whispered. "And I am always left to sit on the sidelines." "Well, that's because they fear for your safety." Naruto was beginning to see what was happening, and it broke his heart. His friend was under the impression that he had abandoned her in favor of his new friends, a sentiment that couldn't be further from the truth. She was, and would forever remain, his best friend. "And they hate me for how I am." Naruto placed a hand on her head and ruffled her hair, something that he knew would never fail to bring a smile to her face. "Why do you take their words so seriously?" he asked, smiling as she looked at him with confusion. "They are stupid. They are what you call them, ignorant human children, you know." His smile grew warmer as she returned the gesture. Naruto wouldn't lie. He was genuinely worried about Ophis while they were playing. For some reason, his friend simply refused to grow up like the other children. She was still the same Ophis that he had met when he was 7. As her best friend, he couldn't simply ask her to stop playing games that could potentially harm her. So, when she did play with him, he couldn't help but worry about her. "Then that means you don't hate me?" "What?" Naruto snapped out of his daze and gasped at her. "Why would I ever hate you, Ophis?" He was stunned. He couldn't believe what she was saying to him. Ophis giggled at the boy's stunned expression. "I don't know," she said, tilting her head and placing a finger under her lower lip, as if deep in thought. "Perhaps you also find me strange," she giggled even louder as the boy slumped in defeat. "No," exclaimed Naruto, reassuring her that she was absolutely fine in his opinion. "You're fine, Ophis," he added. If there was anyone he could never consider odd, it was her. Ophis had accepted him when he was calling himself a monster, and that meant more to him than anything else anyone had ever done for him. "I see," Ophis whispered, reveling in Naruto's praises. However, a part of her couldn't help but feel guilty for thinking those things about him. She couldn't believe she had entertained those thoughts. He was one of the purest beings she had ever met, and that made him more respectable in her eyes. "Naruto," she called out his name to capture his attention. Do you want to live forever?" She knew it was wrong to ask him that, but her heart wanted to hear his thoughts on it. If he said yes, then she might not have been sure about it before, but now she was certain that she would take him with her to her home. Now it was Naruto's time to tilt his head in confusion. "What would you do if you had the power to live forever?" Ophis rephrased her question to ensure his understanding. She wanted him to ponder over it before answering. "Boring." Just like that, Ophis's mood soured in an instant as her initial fear became reality. She knew that humans were not capable of leading a life similar to hers, but hearing him acknowledge that fact only intensified her sorrow. Why? She still decided to ask him the reason behind his thoughts. "Because that would be boring, Ophis." Naruto just repeated his answer, finding no reason to elaborate it. Ophis blinked at him, annoyed by his lack of explanation. "But it also has advantages," she argued, hoping to change his perspective on the subject. "Like what?" "Not being afraid of death like ordinary humans." Ophis didn't have to think twice about it. Immortality was the ultimate remedy for the fear of death. Naruto glanced at the girl, momentarily captivated by her presence. With a mischievous sparkle in his eyes, he raised his hand and softly flicked her nose with his index finger. Life's unpredictability makes human lives interesting, Ophis. He answered her, his voice sounding soft and warm. Huh? A small smile flickered on his lips. Suga Oba-san once told me that humans love more than any other being because they are deeply aware of the fragility of life. He murmured as Ophis listened to him. If we were immortal, our love for others would never be as intense as it is right now. We thrive on the challenge of cherishing every moment. He finished with a gentle nudge on her cheeks to draw her out of her stupor. Ophis was stunned. For the first time in a long while, she found herself truly speechless. Absorbed in the temptations of her immortality, she had never attempted to comprehend the fundamental aspects of human existence. Fighting against time, she whispered to herself. Every endeavor of humanity was an unyielding battle against the unstoppable force of time. They approached everything with immense passion, fueled by their awareness that their time on this world was short-lived. Their insatiable desire for life extended to all aspects, particularly to love. Also, don't you think a life that long would get boring, you know? Ophis was brought out of her thoughts when Naruto pinched her cheeks. I don't know, she answered. I said I don't know, Naruto. Naruto pouted at her. Of course you don't, he mumbled. The girl smiled warmly at the boy. So, you're not interested in that? She inquired, a playful giggle escaping her lips as he shook his head. Fine, then live a normal life, Naruto. Her words were infused with warmth, yet if someone were to delve deeper, they would catch a hint of underlying sorrow. Whoa, you're talking as if you're going to outlive me, Ophis, Naruto chuckled, finding her words quite amusing. Maybe I will. Naruto shook his head and embraced her tightly. No, we will live and die together like true friends, you know, he whispered, holding her even closer. Isn't this what you've always wanted? His words turned warmer as he continued. To be with me forever. Ophis remained silent for a brief moment, savoring the comforting warmth emanating from within him. That's not what I meant, she tried to argue back, but he silenced her with a gentle kiss on her forehead. We will live a magnificent life, just like Ito and Suga-san, Ophis, Naruto said with a smile, fondly reminiscing about the happy couple. Also, even if we aren't able to live for that long, we'll still make our lives unforgettable. Because that's what truly matters, right? He inquired, awaiting her response. Ophis was rendered speechless once again. She didn't know why, but Naruto's words were beginning to make sense to her. Perhaps she was mistaken about everything. Maybe death wasn't as awful as she had thought. Maybe living a normal human life wouldn't be so terrible after all. Maybe starting a family with him, no matter how long it lasts, wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. Maybe, departing within his loving embrace, after creating countless precious memories, wouldn't be such a dreadful fate. You're right, Naruto. Maybe, being a human like her Naruto wasn't that bad after all. The end. Thanks for watching, also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.